A Son for a Son. A loaded title with some clear meanings and some not so clear. One of those references is the old biblical line, an eye for an eye, which is fitting since that is what Aemon wanted. The actual lesson, though, is not to engage in eye for an eye behavior. That's the lesson of what you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to turn the other cheek, forgive and forget, but that's obviously not going to happen here. Very little of either forgetting or forgiving seems to be on tap for the near future. Mercy is in short order. All must choose. And even neutrality might be dangerous. If you're not with us, you're against us. The war hasn't progressed to that stage yet, but you can see it kind of going that way. You know, it's already the signs of it becoming a very hateful, angry, bitter engagement are there already, and you can guess there'll be more. But this episode also had a ton of callbacks and Easter eggs, especially to Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1, but also to House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 1. There's also quite a few direct lines from the books and a few other references as well. In short, there are probably quite a few things you missed. We've got explanations on all that, lore, and of course, good times. It's the beginning of a new season. Let's have fun with it. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. It's time for Season 2, House of the Dragon. Let me very briefly explain what we're all about in case you're new here or in case you're catching up with this and want to know what our schedule is going to be like for the season. We're doing breakdowns of every episode, short ones that'll be about 10 to 15 minutes. Those will be published within 24 to 36 hours of the episode, roughly. We also have these live streams. This first one that you may be watching right now or listening to later, those will be at 6 o'clock Eastern on Mondays. They'll be spoiler-free. We're only going to talk about what happened. Very little about what will happen. Certainly no references to things that haven't happened yet that we know about. No leaks, of course. No spoilers like that. Only book stuff that's already very public. Nothing that's going to tell you what's happening. Wednesdays at 7, we're going to go deeper dives with spoilers a lot of times. The topics will vary. It's going to depend on what happened in the most recent episode, what topics have our attention, what topics have your attention. And then on Saturdays at 3, we do our prediction episodes, which is when we guess what's going to happen next. Mostly in the next episode, but also maybe for the rest of the season. Because sometimes when you guess something's going to happen, you don't always know when it's going to happen, just that you think it might happen at some point in the future.
It might be worth noting, I'll make some guesses.
Yes.
But I don't actually know anything. My role is to kind of be on the... To give the feel of people who haven't read the books and don't know where it's going. You're just watching the show. So, I've read the Game of Thrones books, and I've read a portion of Fire and Blood, but I stopped before it got to this dance section. So I may have some vague knowledge, like, maybe that King's Landing doesn't get burned to the ground. We kind of know that, right? Well, I guess maybe it gets mostly burned and rebuilt. I guess that's a possibility.
Yeah, I guess so. From your perspective.
I
yeah.
am hoping to have some good predictions, but they will be unsullied predictions.
And one of the values of unsullied predictions, too, is you aren't basing your predictions on what you know from the book. You don't expect certain things, and that gives you kind of a fresher perspective a lot of times. It's been valuable for us over the years having an unsullied person cover the show along with us who are very sullied.
That might already come into play a little bit here, because I get the feel from a few other people that's it, is the take from Blood and Cheese. Like, it was even darker. So in my mind, like, that was, I don't know how you can make it much darker. That was pretty bad.
Yeah, right. Well, just in case you don't know who we are, I'm Aziz, that's Sean. We have Ashaya as well, running things from behind the keyboard. She's our technical wizard and does pipe in with some thoughts here and there. If you have questions for us, any of us specifically, for the whole crew, just in general, you can ask them live. Ashaya will send a lot of them directly to us for us to answer live. Others we might handle later. You can also send them to westeroshistory@gmail.com. If you aren't listening live, maybe we'll read your answer in a future episode. Tell us what you liked most, what you didn't like, your favorite performances, Easter eggs and callbacks, things that you noticed that we might not have. There's so many. I'm quite sure I had to have missed a few things. And Sean, looks like we've got our matching shirts today. We have our Dance of the Dragons tour shirts. They look pretty cool. They're designed by Ashaya. If You got the twin dragons here on the front. You got black and green, and the tour dates are on the back. Shay's going to put the image up here because I can't turn around so easily to show you the back of that, and neither can Sean.
I should have worn my shirt backwards.
That would have been fun. That would have done the trick, that's for sure. Now, there was a new intro, not just for us, for House of the Dragon. So let's talk about both of those very briefly. Our new intro is awesome. Thanks to Bran the Builder for making that. It's basically the same music, though it did get an upgrade. Similar to the House of the Dragon intro. Same music, slightly different, but the same basic tune, but with a whole new set of images. So that's cool. But we're going to talk about that separately. It requires its own breakdown. And frankly, we haven't had time to fully study it, given how short a time we've had since the episode dropped and all that. Let's go right to the north. Sean, what did you think of this northern bit? It was pretty cool, huh? It was short, but it really delivered, I thought, for considering it was only about 3 minutes. That whole little thing was only about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was thinking that every image I can remember from the trailers, I think we got already. Yeah. And I'm wondering, is that all we're going to get from the North? I'm kind of guessing that it is. And I'm impressed they went through so much production effort for just that short little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that they did. I'm glad they have a budget enough. If they think it's important, and they've got the budget for it, man. I think that shows like HBO believes in his show, and it shows how good the show is and how popular it is. It's all positive stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And one thing I took particular note of was there's one shot from behind when Cregan and Jace are looking out off the wall. And out of context, you would just think that's Ned and Jon. I mean,
yeah.
There's no way they weren't actively trying to make it look like Ned and Jon, you know?
Yeah, there's some...
Which is fine, yeah.
There's some Benjen vibes in there, too, I thought, a little bit. But you're right, mostly Ned and Jon, even down to the way they talked. I mean, Tom Taylor really he said he was trying to channel Sean Bean. I'd say he nailed it. It technically starts with the Raven and our first set of callbacks. This is very similar to how Winterfell was introduced in Season 1, Episode 1 of Game of Thrones. Even the music is from that episode, though it's not the same music from the first scene. The first Game of Thrones scene is actually happy music. Yay, we're meeting the Starks. It's all happy because it's going to get dark. So they started off happy. And that actually has a cold open before, this is just cold. It's not a cold open. That song, though, is called Goodbye Brother, which, man, that makes it hit so much harder when you know that it's already a really sad song. Several of you wrote and said it brought tears to your eyes. Same. I'm with y'all. It's of course refers to Jon Snow parting from Robb Stark. They expect to see each other again. It's just a temporary party. He says, I look good in black. Black was always your color. And that's obviously very sad because Cregan gets the news from the south while he's talking to Jace that Jace won't ever see his brother again. And Goodbye Brother is a very appropriate song to have been there. And of course, we see this scene playing out. It's not entirely clear if this is something that just happened or it happened like right when Jace got there and Cregan was escorting these men to the wall because they've just taken the vows. And Jace just happens to be there at this time where they've decided winter is coming and they're going through this choosing a ceremony. And that's a convenient time for him to be there, but yeah, that's cool. That's the kind of thing TV shows do a lot. And there's so many other callbacks in this. There's a callback to seeing the wall, beyond the wall, rather. He looks beyond. He's like, oh, and his voice kind of quiets as he's talking. Very similar to Tyrion's initial reaction to it. Or Jon's reaction to seeing the wall for the first time when he's walking towards it is very similar to this unnamed Stark, who has just drawn the black stone the first time he sees the wall. Now, it's a little too bad. Yeah, Book Cregan lost a brother also, so there really is a lot they could have done here. But Jace grieves with his mother later. I mean, how much grieving do we need in one episode? I can kind of understand why they didn't want to just give us all this good grief. That's a lot of grief. Rhaenyra is full of grief. There's plenty of grief in the episode. They didn't need to have Jace break down twice. So I kind of understand that, but that doesn't mean we couldn't have had other things in the North. But hey, I'll give him a little bit of a pass there. Now, this Raven was in the trailers, and we kind of guessed what it might be. One of those guesses was that it was news of Luke. I won't point out my other guesses, which weren't right because they're a little spoilery, but it wasn't. I'm not entirely sure I'm right, though. Is that the same raven? Because that raven passes through the courtyard when they're all standing there, when the choosing is happening, and then the raven arrives at the wall. They've already walked there. So I think it's two different ravens, but whatever. There's a lot of Stark vibes in that scene that shows the choosing. When they show through the arch of Winterfell, there's children running with a dog, and that dog looks like one of the Stark direwolves. There's a pair of girls standing side by side, and one of them has long red hair. It's very much vibes of the first time we see Winterfell in episode 1, season 1 of Game of Thrones. And I do actually appreciate that Tom Taylor is beardless, because he's young, and his father was beardless when we saw him in season 1, episode 1 of House of the Dragon, bending the knee to Viserys and Rhaenyra. Now, Starks don't forget their oaths is a big part of this conversation. Winter is coming is mentioned, and it's a beautiful speech by Cregan. It kicks off what I think is a particularly excellent dialogue in this episode. There's a lot of really good, I'd say, prose for the words they've been given. There's a lot of cleverness, a lot of double meanings. There's a lot of cutting insight. There's a lot of diplomacy. People who are trying to chastise someone while also praise them, you know. So this new bit of lore about Torrhen, I actually like this a lot. They could have easily messed this up. They could have easily said this wrong, and I would not have liked it. But the fact that Cregan describes that this policy of selecting 1 out of every 10 men to go to the wall started after the conquest. That's why it works for me. If it started some other time, I would complain. I'd be like, why haven't we heard of this? Why did they do that? People were volunteering to go to the watch before. It didn't seem necessary. They had so many people there. But we know already, it's well established and has been for a long time, more than a decade, like since well before even the World of Ice and Fire, let alone Fire and Blood came out, that Aegon's conquest severely depleted the watch because there was no longer war between the different kingdoms that would result in large numbers of people sent to the wall. Those stopped happening. Of course, that's a good thing that those wars stopped happening, but this was one of the very few downsides, less people at the watch. So Torrhen, who also in our own analysis seems like a guy that was very forward-thinking, very conscientious. That's the reason he bent the knee instead of fighting a losing war, at least that's part of the evidence, is that, well, he could see that this would result in fewer men for the wall, and it's his job, perhaps more than anyone else, to make sure that doesn't happen. So he institutes this draft. 1 in 10 men go to the wall. Yeah. Were you aware that was a show invention, Sean? Or what did you think of that choosing bit?
I had not heard. I didn't remember ever hearing anything about that before. I remember thinking that's interesting and wondering, like, I think they said 1 in 10 Stark men. So, like,
well, 1 in 10 from the household, not 1 in 10 Stark men, just 1 in 10 people from the household, which could be a Stark, but not necessarily. The guy chosen was a Stark. Ryan Condal clarified that was a Stark who was chosen, but it didn't have to be, because there's not usually going to be 10 Starks, you know.
From the household of Winterfell, I guess. Yes. So, like, of all the different servants and stable, everyone maintaining it. I guess that open one, it means there'll be sending more than one, because there, I think, would be scores or hundreds of people.
Which meant sense that procession north was a lot of people. It wasn't just the one guy. Yeah.
And maybe they even had that little bit about the sacrifice of duty. Mm-hmm. So it might be, we appreciate you serving Winterfell. We appreciate you being a bannerman to the north. But there's a specific catch to this. Keep in mind, you might have to suddenly give up. It made me wonder about other logistical details about what if someone is already married with kids? They got to up and leave their families behind, and would that deter people from wanting to serve?
Well, you can see
what I think. Okay, I think that probably sometimes someone would volunteer to take someone's place. I think there are certainly exceptions where you would go across and just logical sense would be made. Like, this man has a pregnant wife right now. You're not sending him to the wall. I think they are not completely without some rationality and logic here.
And I think that might also be why the practice was discontinued. It's no longer a thing by the time we get to the time of Ned Stark. So these flaws are not bad writing. They're a reason why this practice was discontinued, because it wasn't perhaps fully considered. Maybe there was some flaws with it. Torrhen comes up with this idea, and then, like, actually this isn't so great. This doesn't work, and that's why it's at this point it's only been going for 100 years or so, and so it hasn't. They haven't had a time where it's like, actually, this is a terrible idea. Actually, you just chose someone that is too vital. Like you said, there's lots of things that could go wrong here, and that would be why it stops. Which is why I accept it. If it's something thousands of years old, these flaws would be like they would have had to deal with this. This needs more explanation, But a short-term thing.
Come up in the lores or whatnot. We've heard about it before.
Yes.
I did think it was a good touch, too, that the stones they were drawing, it seemed like they're mostly white or grayish. Winterfell, northern color. What's the word? Stark,
Mm-hmm.
But then the one going to the wall gets the black one. They're going to join the Black Brothers. Aesthetically, it made sense in a lot of different ways.
So that black stone choosing is one of many parallels I have I'm holding on to discuss later. We've got a bunch of parallels, Easter eggs, and stuff like that. So we'll either get to that this episode, or if we run out of time, we'll get to it another time, because I love those parallels. Let's talk about Dragonstone.
Real quick, I wanted to say that
Sure.
I thought it was noteworthy that we didn't see exactly how it came about, but Cregan said he appreciated that Jace didn't use his dragon to threaten him.
Yeah.
Like Aemon did with what's the Baratheon Lord?
Boros, Lord Boros, yeah.
Boros,
Absolutely.
And Luke attempted to, I guess. Like I wonder somehow how that logistics worked out too, as you were saying. I was kind of supposing that he went to Winterfell to meet Cregan, but Cregan wasn't there because he was escorting these new Knights Watchmen to the wall. So that let them show us from like a TV standpoint, we get to see both Winterfell and the wall.
Good point. I think that does make sense, actually. I think it's a very good theory that he shows up at the Winterfell and they're like, oh, no, he's up at the wall. Just go there. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Another thing, I started keeping track of how often we saw the dragons, just something I was kind of curious about.
Yeah.
And about 1 in 4 scenes had a dragon in it.
Ooh.
Sometimes it's harder to find exactly what a scene is, but like I counted that whole sequence at the end is just one scene.
Right on.
But at 20-ish scenes, and there were 4 or 5, dragon appearances, but only one of them was the greens. We saw Vhagar one time. All the other times were black dragons. So
okay, well, they keep theirs in the dragon pit, so they're not out as much, I guess. But that's also because they're not the gullet and all this other stuff. Yeah. Anyway,
there's reasons for it, but it's still interesting. I wanted to think about, how are they presenting the dragons here? How are we going to start this off?
Right.
One of the very quick note for your intro thing. This probably doesn't matter very much, but I just can't not express this information. The eye for an eye thing. It's not that it is like this shift in biblical lore or whatever that eventually Jesus is saying turn the other cheek. But the eye for eye, originally, what they were trying to say is if someone steals something, you don't put them to death.
No.
If they take your
punishment
cup,
should fit the crime.
Take a cup back.
Yeah.
It's even punishment, right? Exactly. So
yeah.
So to that end, on some level, maybe Aemon or Daemon or someone is trying to do the right thing. I don't know.
On that end, it's two innocents dying, an eye for a son for a son.
Yeah.
Yeah, that part's not so great. That's not so fair or whatever. Yeah, so Rhaenys returns from holding the blockade, which is not fully formed yet. The blockade is going to come up several times this episode. It's very relevant to both plot lines, both locations, rather. Daemon is increasingly impatient and worried. He was already kind of like a caged animal wanting to go out and start the war. He wants to go to Harrenhal. He wants to take action. He's worried that they're taking action while he's just sitting there. He's also paranoid at Rhaenyra just going out on her own in this state of mind when she's vulnerable. We predicted that just like Daemon telling Rhaenyra and blaming the death of his brother on the Greens, saying, they murdered my brother, which that didn't happen. He died slowly over this long period of time. But given he blamed them for it, what are the odds that he doesn't blame Aemond for this? Like, of course he's pinning that directly on him. Of course it's his fault. He doesn't have a nuanced view of this at all and isn't particularly willing to entertain nuance about it. He even says, look, when she's out there looking for evidence of her son, Aemond could just pounce on her. And then Rhaenys says that clever answer, well, I would feel bad for Aemond in that case. Now, she's just joking and downplaying his anger, trying to deflect, because I don't think Rhaenyra would win that engagement, but she'd do better than she might on any other day. Now, so they're arguing about one of the central themes of this episode, duty. The first word of the episode, duty is sacrifice. all men must pay, it comes before everything except, it comes before blood. The Tullys would disagree, but he says all men of honor must pay its price.
I was going to say, it is an interesting distinction. All men of honor.
Yeah, he's like, well, I can't expect...
honor, you might get away with not paying a price.
You can't expect men of dishonor to pay any price. They steal and, yeah. So he's wants to take action. He's ready. He's chomping at the bit. Which is it again? Chomping.
Just don't ask Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
So they're arguing over what their duty is in this moment. Rhaenys is like deferring to the fact that Rhaenyra hasn't given them any orders, and Daemon's like, she's the queen. The queen shirks her duties as the mother grieves, and that's really bothering him. Now, Daemon should remember the line he gave in season 1, episode 1 of House of the Dragon, when he's confronted with the line, "Did you say it, heir for a day? Did you say it?" He says, "We all grieve in our own way, Your Grace." So maybe he should remember that. But he's pretty angry right now, and, like I said, doesn't have a lot of nuance. But Rhaenys handles him pretty well. She's like, yeah, you can't order me around, and I'm tired, so bye. But he's not wrong in that if they can take out Vhagar, it's a humongous advantage that they've gained, because Vhagar is pretty much the reason why they can't do a lot of things that they would otherwise do. The Greens are realizing that too, that Vhagar is so powerful, and is where Vhagar is where you can't be. And Daemon is struggling to accept that. He wants to go challenge Vhagar, and Aemon's, some of that power is going to his head. But more on Aemon later. Let's stick with Dragonstone here. Daemon blames Rhaenys for not killing the Greens when she had the chance, something he's also going to say to Eric and Mysaria. He's going to blame all these people for not doing this when they had the chance. He's blaming that on them. It's part of his just wild animal, like, I got to do something, I got to fight, I got to make this right in his mind. Rhaenys in turn says Daemon is being too vindictive. She's not lost to vengeance, meaning Rhaenyra, like he is. But Rhaenyra is kind of vindictive. She's once Aemon Targaryen. So, by the way, Emma Darcy says themselves that this is a darkness in Rhaenyra that is shared with Daemon more so than they'd like to admit. And if there's two actors in this show who are the most worth listening to about their characters, it's Emma Darcy and Matthew Needham, who, of course, plays Larys. The words they use to describe their characters, the insight, it's like hearing prose. They're so eloquent in describing their characters. I think Emma might be number one in that. The way they talk about Rhaenyra is, and the choices that she makes, it's really interesting, really insightful, and I can't do it justice with my own words because I'm not as eloquent as either of them are, at least not when describing their characters. So we get a brief jaunt to Storm's End before returning to Dragonstone. It's beautiful and haunting. There's an amazing shot of Storm's End in the background. This is Emma's acting being top-notch, just lots of different grief. She has one line the entire episode. I'm not sure if y'all realize that. She says one sentence the whole episode. It's hard to do that. Sean, I remember you and I noticed that maybe one time in the show Vikings really long ago. There was an episode where Ragnar only said like one line the whole episode, and we thought that was pretty cool. Now, it's not nearly as artful as this one. It certainly doesn't have the grief. The challenge for the acting isn't quite as intense, but it still was a really difficult thing to do, and he had to do a lot of things with just his face, and I think this is that, but maybe boosted a few levels.
Filmmaking is a collaborative effort too. It required good writing and editing and directing and everything to put herself in positions where the facial acting was all that was needed, right? Like it was. I'm sure she didn't decide to only speak one line as an actress.
Right.
They didn't randomly decide this. I'm sure it was like an active decision that they had to work the whole script and production around. And I thought it was outstanding. It makes it more meaningful and more powerful when that's the only thing that you say. You know?
Yeah, and they had a different angle to this too, which is Sunfire could emote some of what Rhaenyra would have been emoting. Oh, I'm sorry, Syrax. Yeah, Syrax, of course, because what?
Say that again.
Of course, Syrax does a lot of the emoting for Rhaenyra because there's the mournful roaring and the anger and a few of the things that can be expressed through the dragon instead, which I think is pretty clever. And although, to be fair, it's something they've done before. It's always good.
And Arrax is Cyrax's egg, right? That
maybe.
That's what people think. They
maybe.
look a lot like Cyrax, and it makes sense.
It would make sense,
I think I like to choose that interpretation, yes.
But we don't know for
I
sure.
thought about this, too, that even if it is her egg, she might not necessarily even realize that. As far as I know, the dragons don't, like, hatch and raise their own babies, so she might not necessarily have an emotional connection. It might just be the reflection of the dragon and dragon rider, but it could be another layer that was in her also.
Absolutely. I'm totally down for that theory. So part of what Daemon and Rhaenys talked about was how it's painful for a mother to receive news of their child's death via Raven, and they need to go seek proof of it being real because it's too not easy is the wrong word, but your mind apparently will refuse to accept it, given it's such a tragic thing to have to accept. And Rhaenys knows this from experience, and it's one of the few things that gets Daemon to back down a little in this moment, because the mention of Lena definitely brings him up a little short. It takes away a little of his anger, remembering her and her bravery, especially because this was Vhagar's previous rider. So he's got a whole lot of feelings about this, because he's like, I'm going to go kill Vhagar. He doesn't even say Aemon's name in that moment. He says, if we kill Vhagar and her rider. He doesn't even want to say the guy's name. So this whole bit about ravens and delivering news is a big part of the episode as well, because obviously it's how news gets to the north as well. So when she finds there's the moment where Rhaenyra lands Cyrax on the beach and rips everything apart. Or not rips everything apart, but pulls the net out and gets the cloak and then heads home. When she does return, Daemon immediately just asks if she found what she was looking for. Again, his impatience is there. He's like, you were looking for... Rhaenys told me you were looking for physical proof. Did you find it? He doesn't say it quite like that, but that's basically what he's saying. And she nods. He's like, yes, I found the cloak. And then, of course, a little bit later is when they have the funeral scene, which we'll get to in a moment. And this is when she does utter that one single line. I want Aemon Targaryen. Everyone's updating her with plans, we're ready to attack, we're ready to do this, we're ready to do that. She just ignores it all, says the one line, pauses briefly, kind of then walks away. And they're like, well, at least we have a command now. It's not what we expected, it's not what we wanted. We have these other things kind of up in the air, but at least we have something we can go do. Although really that's just Daemon. There's no one, it's not a call to action for anyone else.
Yeah, I read that. Instantly, that's one way they managed this, is when he asked her that, she just nodded. She didn't say anything.
Yeah, she just nodded. Yeah, just tearful.
And
she
came around, he was kind of cut her off as she entered the council room, the painted table, and then everyone's kind of giving these reports. And it's almost like none of that mattered to her. Just get Aemon. I'm not even thinking about the war or the crown or the whatever else. And it was... I think when Daemon was asking her, did you find what you need? On some level, he's asking, did you find proof? Did you find a body? Whatever else. But I think really what he wants to know is, did you find justification for me to go be violent now?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Please do what I've been wanting to do this whole time.
Take me off the leash now. Please uncage me, unchain me. Yeah, that's what he wants. And it wasn't quite the unchaining he wanted, but it was something he could go do. And it involved killing and action.
Yeah.
So super chat from Dom. Hey Dom, shout out to Folkwise YouTube channel. He says Aziz and Alt Shift X did the same chomping at the bit thing today. It's a big question. Everybody knows whether in the US or Australia, they want to know if it's champing or chomping. Let's go to Driftmark. Corlys limps to the dock with help of his cane. He's still, recovering, maybe permanently injured from his ordeal, and we meet the man that saved him, a burly sailor named Alan. This guy's clearly in some kind of command role because he's updating Corlys on the status of the blockade. He says 7 more ships were sent out to reinforce the blockade. He says he doesn't think it's enough. Corlys is impressed, though, that his own ship has even been recovered and that it's going to be repaired. He says, I want this ship to lead the blockade. Yes, it's going to be difficult to hold this blockade, but with my ship out there, that'll help a lot. Alan tells him it's going to be weeks. There was a vibe in this scene, wasn't there, Sean? This is where you being Unsullied is really valuable, because we obviously could say some more about this. but we're not gonna. And so I really want to hear what you have to say about this. Like, what did you there was some unspoken things here, weren't there? Like some stuff between the lines. Like, how do you tell me what you think.
One of my first thoughts was, okay, here's a new character. It seemed like they spent enough time that this isn't just a throwaway scene. This guy's coming back.
Yeah.
And it seemed like Corlys was, expressing gratitude. This guy saved his life, but it didn't seem cordial or warm between them, So like, I don't know if there's some other past and Alan saving his life might've been begrudging or, maybe it was Alan's fault that Corlys got injured in the first place, and I'm not sure. And all that tension, for lack of a better word, between them was also disrupted by the presentation of this knife that was meant for Jace or for Luke, who's dead now. So like, there was a lot going on there that these seemingly stoic men were not letting seep through to me as an audience yet anyway. So yeah, I am intrigued. Yeah.
One thing I noticed was that, when Alan mentions, he's like, I'll speak to my brother about what the shipwrights can do, which implies his brother's a shipwright. And that gives Corlys kind of pauses a little at that line, but he pauses much longer when the dagger is brought out. He's like, oh, and Alan apologizes. He's like, I'm sorry for the loss of your heir. And he calls him his heir, notably, by the way, not like your grandson or whatever. Yeah. And so is Joffrey the heir now to Driftmark? It hasn't been settled, but that's kind of an open question at this point. So obviously when one heir is gone, that's a big question in general for the throne, but in places like Driftmark too.
Do they I feel bad. I lose track of the names, but was it Lena, who was betrothed to Lucerys?
Rhaena.
Would she now get betrothed to Joffrey?
Big age gap, but it's happened. But I mean, it's a pretty big age gap. There's been plenty
of big age gaps, and it seems key that the true Valyrian line continue. Right,
that marriage was part of making sure that was done under under wraps. So you're right. Good call. So this is all a developing situation, as you said. They wouldn't expect answers necessarily for it right away, but you really did point out several of the important bits here that are crucial. And there's something else going on. They'll definitely explore it further. That hesitation, that like you said, lack of warmth, or for better, maybe for lack of better words, is there is something there. You picked up on it correctly. I'm glad you did, but we got a lot to talk about. So we'll come back to this because, like you said, it's just now getting started. Mysaria.
Yeah, it's just, I want to say real quick, it's just like, hey, thanks for saving my life. You're welcome. I got to get back to work now.
Actually, I'm glad you said that, because when he says it was only my duty, which again, big theme of the episode, he said he did his duty. And unlike all the other duty in this episode, that sounds funny. There's duty comes up so many times in this episode. This is the only time where the duty isn't given blatant conflict thrown in the midst of it. Here you can tell there's some conflict. It just isn't clear what it is. So there's something. It just isn't. We haven't been told yet.
The one place where you would have thought more duty would come up is in the sewers.
Yes, right. There was hardly any duty down there. There were two very, very bad men, very duty-headed men, but they were doing their duty too, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about Mysaria.
Yeah, can I add something here as we segue to her? Because, of course, I rewatched last season leading into this, and I remember something that it clicked in my head that if, when it originally came out and we covered it, if we talked about this, I just don't remember. When Mysaria meets with Otto, he's going to pay her to find out where Aegon is, right? Yeah. And she has this demand. She's like, look, I'll tell you, I'll help you here. You're paying me money, but also I want you to stop the abuse of children in the city, And he's like, okay, sure, I'll look into that. And she says, and I want you to remember how powerful I am. I could have just killed Aegon like a wasp on a fruit. Don't forget,
Don't forget who put him on the throne.
Right.
Yeah.
And Otto's like, I won't forget. And that's, on one hand, that's a I won't forget, I'm indebted to you. But on the other hand was that I won't forget, I'm going to take care of you because I can't have this problem coming after me, you know?
That's exactly what I wrote in the synopsis, in our breakdown. I wrote, his way of remembering her was burning her establishment down.
Right.
Although he didn't do that. That was Larys who did it.
Exactly, right.
I think she thinks Otto did it, though. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. She's going to blame Otto for that.
Yeah.
That's what I was going through on my rewatch. Whether or not that occurred to me, we talked about it a couple years ago, I don't remember. But on my rewatch, I was like, I wonder if she's going to hold Otto responsible for what Larys did. And if so, what will the impact of that be? And sure enough, we see, at least on some level, that seemed to motivate her to help Daemon out, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So we get started with her because I put this right here because of the blockade, and she's the one. We talk about Alan and Corlys, and then it's their blockade that captures her. Where do we suppose she was running to? I guess Essos. Like, she wasn't going to Dragonstone on purpose, I don't think. Maybe she was. Maybe she was going there to talk to Rhaenyra, because I don't think she wanted to see Daemon, though. I don't think she wanted to be seen by him again, given the way he confronted her and outed her for some of her things. She talked her way out of much worse. Like you said, she was guilty of a lot of the things he said she was guilty of. She's like, I couldn't have killed him, even though she said she could have killed him. And then she says, all I did was profit from it. And even though she tells Otto, remember who put him on the throne. like Otto, Daemon's like, you put him on the throne. She's like, no, I didn't. I just profited from him. He's like, no, you did. You really did. But she's good at talking. She kind of, white wormed her way out of it. And she did kind of go too far, though. She did overplay her hand with Otto, even though, like you said, it was Alicent's order to Larys upon Larys' suggestion. Larys brought Alicent the idea and got the okay in the same brief, 3 sentences there. And yeah, so she's despondent. You can see why she's just kind of at a loss. She's lost everything. She lost her establishment. She lost her connections. Cheese thinks she's dead. So that's one silver lining for her, is that probably no one's after her anymore because they think she's dead. But now that she's on Dragonstone, maybe her star will rise again. I don't know. There's a conversation she was having in the trailer.
Cheese thinks he's dead? Thinks she's dead?
Yeah, Cheese thought she was dead.
Daemon
brings her up to Cheese. And Cheese says, we thought she was dead. He says, her ghost talked to me. He just plays it off and says, her ghost told me that you had gambling debts. Cheese.
Okay, yeah. I do remember that moment. I just mixed up which one was which. But.
Yeah. So she's a very good liar, and, she did have some positive things she wanted from her position of power, unlike most people. But whether you want good things from your power or bad things from it, power can go to your head, and you can go too far. You can get loose with it. You can get arrogant with it. You can think yourself safe when you're not, which is very much a theme of this episode. The arrogance of the Greens and thinking the only threat is from dragons, and there's no threat at all because they have Vhagar, leads them to not think that this kind of thing could ever happen, which also happened to Mysaria. She didn't think this kind of thing would ever happen either, I suppose, or she wouldn't have, gone so deep in with Otto.
This may be a little too, I might be stretching my judgment on the characters a little too much, but typically people expect things of other people that they would do themselves, right? A liar is always suspicious that other people are lying to them. True. Whereas an honest person, it might be very naive to the fact that someone is lying to them. Does that make sense? So Daemon would do something underhanded and murderous. We've seen him do it multiple times. The Greens, maybe not so much. Maybe that's why they weren't expecting this. They are more honorable in their approach to this war. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but
it's maybe not honorable isn't the right word. They don't have this particular brand of cunning. I think their cunning comes in different forms. Like Otto was
trying to.
Yeah, Otto ordered Harold Westerling to go to King's Land, to go to Dragonstone and kill Rhaenyra and her children. He just gave that order.
Well,
it wasn't subterfuge, but what's the difference? It's still an order to kill a bunch of children, and what's the difference?
He ordered him to go arrest them.
No, he ordered him to kill them. No, he didn't. He ordered them to kill them. It was an order to kill them. Yeah, he specifically said kill them. And that's why he took his cloak off and said, "No, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not doing that."
I thought that was in the wake of Alicent saying, they won't bend the knee. If you go tell them to bend the knee, they're not going to do it. And then he orders Westerling go arrest them, which is in the context of what Alicent is saying.
He specifically says kill them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I want to give a shout out to our boy Eric Cargill, Sir Eric with an E, who says it's a matter of honor that he defend Mysaria right there. And I just want to say I appreciate the Cargills in general and Eric for speaking on her behalf.
I agree.
Yeah,
that was a
I
really
agree.
good scene.
Yeah, he kind of stood up to Daemon a little bit there. He could have just put his tail between his legs and, okay, I'm in trouble with the prince. I better just do what I'm told. But he said no. Like, he still believes he's doing the right thing. And on some level, I think he might respect his brother, too. Because that was also part of the point he made when Daemon further challenged. He was like, look, we joined the Kingsguard when we were 18, and we're supposed to protect the royal family. And then the royal family turns on itself. Like, so we don't know who we're supposed to protect anymore.
Yeah.
I think he made very logical argument for his attempts to be moral. It was right on multiple levels.
It was very much the same Jaime Lannister argument that he presented to Brienne. He's like, look, what are you supposed to do when your oaths conflict? He's like, well, to protect the weak, defend the women, the king is always right, but the king is the one killing the kids and the women. Like, what are you supposed to do? It's the same dilemma. I mean, he's even a Kingsguard, right? What side are, like he said, this has been their vow, their oath the whole time. What's he supposed to do? Just drop it on a whim? And for who? For which side? How's he supposed to be? He's basically a cop. Cops aren't supposed to make Supreme Court justice decisions. Who's in charge is not his call. So it's usually simpler, but it wasn't. So that's again to the duty theme of this episode and the conflict therein.
Yeah, I think that Eric does not think his brother Arik is evil at all. I don't think he thinks that. I think he as he points out to Daemon tries to call him out on. He's like, "No, man, I made a really hard decision." And so yeah, I just don't think that he has hatred in his heart for his brother at all right now. Even if he thinks Aegon is not the righteous king, he could see how his brother was torn.
Well said. So let's move on. Let's talk about the twin flame scene, as I'm calling it, or you could really call it three flames, because it was three candles and three things dropped in the funeral pyre. It's Luke's funeral interspersed with Alicent at the Great Sept. It was a really very well done scene, a tearjerker, right up there with several of the other scenes in this episode. Very tearjerkish in this one. First, Jace and Rhaenyra are reunited, and he attempts to do his duty by delivering the results of his mission, but he just can't get through it. Like, he just starts crying before he can even finish saying what he's got to say. And Rhaenyra, again, says nothing, just embraces him. Soon after they have the full funeral, there's some interesting older cowled man in this funeral who's like the only non-family member there. It's just a few of them and this one dude, and maybe a couple of guards too, I guess, now that I'm seeing the images on screen.
Oh, Dragonstone.
Well, they had a different maester there, and he's young, so I don't think this can't be the maester.
Maybe the Castellan of Dragonstone?
I'll just say the thing I noticed was when Jace comes in to see Rhaenyra, Bela walks him in and gives him a little squeeze on the shoulder.
Yeah, a little escorting him in.
That's
as
his
he's
betrothed.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. So it's just, like I said, small ceremony. Bela and Rhaenyra are there. Jace and Joffrey and Rhaenyra. I don't think Daemon was there. Did Daemon not attend? As I was writing this, I was like, was Daemon not there? I don't see him there.
I thought he left.
Oh, had he already left? Yeah, he already left. You're right. He'd already left to go execute his plans. He's already sailing to King's Landing. Good point. Okay.
I appreciated
it wasn't his son.
I appreciated them giving the beat to Rhaena there, who, again, this is the death of her potential future. This was her betrothed, as Sean rightfully pointed out a little bit ago. But who knows what the future holds for her right now, right? Like, she doesn't have a betrothed right now. She doesn't have a dragon. I think she's a big question mark for a lot of people right now. I don't know if you have a thought, Sean, on what you'd like to see for Rhaena.
Yeah, where do you think, what's your thoughts on her right now? It is a weird spot that she's in, like Ashaya said.
Yeah, she's got a lot of personal struggle, but her house too, if on some level, it seems like a lot of these characters do share the importance of the legacy of their families, if that makes sense. So that's maybe just one small piece of the puzzle. But I'm thinking about that specifically because if she does get betrothed to Joffrey, that seems like from the, big picture political view, even Lionel Strong, who is kind of presented as like a protagonistic, wise character, still wanted to marry the 30-year-old to the 12-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, because he just knows, like, this is just the right political move for the land. Sorry about your personal relationships, whether or not you love each other or whatever you care about the age difference. This is just what you need for stability in the politics. And I think I personally, screw the politics, just step down from the throne, let someone else. All this nonsense over being king or who's going to be is not as important as like basic morality. You don't sacrifice morality. Anyway, but I do see the importance to how the lineage of the Valerians is going to continue and the inheritance of Driftmark. And it just makes sense. Okay, just marry her to Joffrey, and that solves all these problems, except that it's so messed up to marry
they wouldn't be able to start having
18-year-old to a 7-year-old or whatever.
Yeah, if they're trying to make sure the line continues, marrying like a 5-year-old to a 16-year-old isn't the best way to make sure they have children. It's not that out of whack, but it's definitely like you're setting yourself up for it not working out. Yeah, so like there's one thing, like, are they even going to be into each other? It's much harder to accomplish that, for you to do your husbandly and wifely duties when there's these things like big age gaps that lead to you maybe not being so into each other. But yeah, it's a developing situation for sure. Let's not forget about Driftmark when the Iron Throne is in play.
As you can see on the screen, I wanted to point out that Joffrey's little 5-year-old Joffrey's submission to the pyre, as you can see, is Luke's toy. He had clearly inherited, like he had, like, maybe he'd been playing with them because Luke obviously wasn't really was too old to play with his old toys. But you remember that toy was the one that he had as a young boy as his old actor.
Yeah, I think we remember seeing it in episode 7 or something like that. Yeah, it's a definite callback. Good catch there. I missed that one. I totally forgot about it. I recognized it as Luke's toy because, of course, it's Luke's toy. They're throwing Luke's stuff in there, but I forgot that we'd seen it before. So as each item is consigned to the flames, there's 3 items, one from each of Rhaenyra, Jace, and Joffrey. Alicent lights a candle. So it's part of the paralleling going on here. And Alicent, each candle represents a recently deceased person in her mind, someone she's thinking of. The first being her mother, Allery Florent, then Viserys Targaryen, her recently deceased husband, the king, and then after hesitation and build up, and it's coming, she says Lucerys, but what you don't know is coming is how she's going to say it. Like, you can tell she's about to say Lucerys, at least that's how I read it, but I was really wondering whether she would say just Lucerys? Would she say Lucerys Strong? Would she say Lucerys Velaryon? Would she say, I don't know.
I was on edge just about whether she would bring herself to say Lucerys'
You thought she might just not do it
at all. Like, I was like, is she actually going to say his name? I wasn't really on edge about how she would say it. I think I always assumed she would say just like how he's referred to in world. She would say it properly.
And that moment got sort of addressed again later in the episode when I'm pretty sure it was Aemon said something to the effect of she has love for our enemy, right?
Which makes her a fool.
He was like trying to cast doubt on her as the queen or as the decision maker or whatever.
Yes,
if she's sympathetic with the bad guys.
Yeah, definitely more on that later. There's definitely power struggles going on in both factions, questions of leadership in both factions, and that is another of many parallels. Sticking here a bit longer, this scene with the funeral and the lighting of candles is another throwback to season 1, episode 1 of House of the Dragon, which had a funeral scene for Aemma and Balon, with Syrax being mournful, just like she is in this episode under similar-ish circumstances. I'd say this 3 flames or twin flames scene, twin funerals, 3 flames scene, was the most obviously set up to be a parallel, but there's so many of them. This episode in general, I thought, was extremely well connected to itself, the way the threads flowed from one plotline to another while also connecting to other parts that would pop up later, just like a tapestry, like the new intro. I thought it really lived up to that, and I hope the rest of the season continues that well, because there's always things we can criticize, but in terms of the way the episode flowed together and the way the different plot threads aligned with each other, I thought that was quite well done. What about you, Sean? You have any thoughts on the flow of the episode or anything along those lines, episode construction?
Oh, yeah, I definitely have several parallels to other episodes that I'm champing at the bit to.
Well, we'll talk about the parallels later. I just mean like your thoughts on how it was.
But yeah,
made.
just recognizing how well they did that. I mean, it's just amazing writing. It's so well done. I did want to point out though one thing that Alleria Florent,
Allery
Florent.
Mm-hmm.
I in my mind I was just in the context. Okay, that's got to be her mom, but that's kind of like just now made up, right?
We did not know who his mother's name was or her mother's name was.
We knew that ahead of the season, actually, because Ryan Condal mentioned it in an interview ahead of the season, and we were like, ooh, and now I see why he mentioned it. It's because it was just prominently mentioned in episode 1.
They had already written the name. Yeah.
And I'd like to point out that Allery is a particularly resonant name, speaking of parallels, for her to have as her mother's name, because the mother of the Tyrells in the main series is Allery Hightower. So Allery is traditionally, a rich woman name, has been a Florent married into the Hightowers, and then a Hightower was later named after it, and then so Marjorie's mother is Allery Hightower. And so anyways, I think it's a brilliant name choice. Applause to them for the choice.
Yeah, that was a good one. I agree with Shea. So let's take a minute here and say, in addition to these cool shirts that we've got, that is a way for you to support History of Westeros podcast, you can also join us over on Patreon. We will be doing some bonus material this season. I haven't figured exactly out what it is. There's so much to do, so much to cover in the season. We've got to get all our topics in a row, but we'll figure something out for that. In the meantime, you can sign up now, and we've got lots of pre-existing bonus content, quite a bit. And of course, it's just a good way for you to support the show and get to listen to us in the podcast form without ads. That's a nice little bonus we add as well. Plus, you get the inside track on asking us questions and things like that. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Go to patreon.com/history of Westeros and choose the level that's right for you. We've got a lot of different choices. You can get a cool nickname, lots of Westeros themed stuff like titles, and we also have access to our scripts and cool stuff like that. Also, happy birthday to Fox and Brambles. How's it going, Ashton?
I wanted to give Fox and Brambles a special shout out, because if that name doesn't mean anything to you, that's the person who designed our logo, 1. And 2, Ashton has designed lots and lots of sigils, shirts, and stickers, which you can find on their Etsy, and I think you'll probably see lots of people wearing their Daemon Rogue Prince shirt or their Aemon shirt. Yeah, you'll see a lot of her shirts this season. So happy birthday, Ashton.
I was wearing her sea snake shirt during the episode yesterday, in fact, and Fox and Brambles makes me think of Florence, too.
True.
Fox head symbol, right? Okay, so also on Fridays, I'm continuing with my Twitch game streams, twitch.tv, History of Westeros. It's the game Crusader Kings 3, but it's modded to be Westeros. It's extremely well detailed, and the game works like this. I play a lord, a lady, a king, or a queen, and when I die, I become my heir. That's how the game works. It's not just how I do it, that's how the game works. And you role play the character based on the personality traits they acquire during the game. If they're a fool, they act foolishly. If they're intelligent, they act intelligently. If they're a drinker like Aegon II, they drink a lot. If they're a psycho like Joffrey, I do psychopathic things with them. Yeah, it just depends on the character. And y'all, the people who attend always give me good advice on what decisions to make, who to ally with, who to marry, what to name our children, lots of fun stuff like that. So check it out. Fridays at 6, twitch.tv, History of Westeros. A big question I have is, what was Helena whispering? I think we're just getting to the tip of the spear with Helena. We might see her family start to figure out that she's been having visions and dreams. Maybe not. But we asked Ryan Condal in our interview with him if anyone had noticed that she predicts the future sometimes. And he didn't give a straight answer, but basically he said yes. He didn't say who. He didn't give us...
He said some people are paying attention, I think is how he worded it, right?
Yeah. It was a very diplomatic answer, but it wasn't a no. It was not a no. It wasn't a negative either. It wasn't he wasn't trying to steer us away from that. And what we've seen... So let me get back to this original question. She was whispering something. When Aegon comes into the room and in retrospect, sad foreshadowing for which child is which. Even Aegon can't recognize which kid is which. His own son. He's like looking for his son. He's like, oh, that's my daughter. Where's Aegon? And
I actually had to rewind that. Like, what? Why did he walk? Oh, it's hard to tell the twins apart. Even his own dad. Or
So, but when he comes in the room, Helena's stitching something, which some people's theory is that it's already a funeral shroud. She was already stitching a funeral shroud for her son. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe we'll figure that out
black,
later.
Though, right?
No, it was green and gold. It was like their house color. So I kind of I'm not so sure about that, but it's a good theory, at least worth considering. But she's whispering something, and the first thing she says is the only one or the only ones, and then I can't make out the rest. It's not on the subtitles, so before you say, what did the subtitles say, the answer is nothing, because we always watch with subtitles on anyway. So I don't know what she's saying, but it just adds to the mystery of her as a dreamer, as a predictor, as a prophet, and we're going to do a lot more studying on her, and the show has given us a treasure trove. There's photos, there's images of her drawings and sketches on the walls in a book. Yeah, she's got a lot. It's got some deep, rich stuff that we can't get into now because it would be spoilery, because some of it's, of course, these are prophecies, some of them, well, for example, there's a rat in there, which you already kind of know what that's about. But there's others that we shouldn't talk about. So if you figure out what Helena's saying, please let me know. And or if you just have a guess, I bet a lot of you didn't even catch that, because I didn't catch it on my first watch. So it's pretty easy to miss.
I took note because in one of the behind the scenes bits that they make for this, they pointed out, I was like, oh, and I looked at it kind of superficially and decided, I'm not sure I want to figure this out. I don't want to start asking questions and spoil myself. Also interesting, by the way, the subtitles, you pointed out that it doesn't say what she said in the subtitles. There's other interesting things too about the subtitles that I think one time Corlys called Alan,
mm-hmm.
but in the subtitles it said Alan of Hull. It gave his full name when he was speaking off screen. And same thing, I don't remember. I think maybe eventually someone might have called those guys Blood and Cheese. Yeah,
they are. They're in the
took note from the subtitles is where they gave it.
In the subtitles, yeah.
Can I say a fun fact about Blood and Cheese? That in the rehearsal scripts, they were not referred to as Blood and Cheese. They were referred to as Boris and Charlie, which is very funny to me because of Charlie Kelly from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
being a rat catcher.
Yeah, he's always bashing rats. He looks kind of like him. He's always eating cheese. And now they call him Charlie. I'm just very tickled. I made some edits for our breakdown video of that.
The parallels are overwhelming between Charlie and Cheese, other than the murder, and the gambling debts, I guess, and the violence. But Charlie's a little violent. But yeah, the cheese part, even they're both obsessed with cheese. It's great. So there's another. Go ahead.
We know those It's Always Sunny guys are fans of Martin's writings in general. They even had little cameos in Game of Thrones, right?
They did, and David and Dan had cameos in It's Always Sunny. Maybe Ryan Condal will as well. So that brings me to another of my favorite parallels. Since Ashaya mentioned the It's Always Sunny crossover, I'm going to mention the Office crossover. There was an Office crossover. Aegon II said a line worthy of Michael Scott, which was one of his drinking buddies asked him, would you rather be loved or feared? And he goes, it's got to be both. And Michael Scott goes further and says, I want them to fear how much they love me, which would have been perfect for Aegon to say. And I really wonder if that was just something they didn't. I don't know if I wonder if they realized they were basically channeling The Office there. But either way, I love it, whether it was intentional or not. How good is this casting, by the way? Like, Blood and Cheese were great. Like, that guy's voice was just so intimidating and terrifying. Like, I tell you, if that guy was 10 years older, he could have given Rory McCann a run for his money trying out for the Hounds role. I don't think he would have won, but he would have made the cut to the finals there. That voice is great.
I think he should have a voice off with Christian Bale's Batman.
Who can go deeper? Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, they should have like a little screen that's like shows their decibels, like how low, like what pitch they in, like who can get lower instead of like who can hit the lower bass notes, like yeah. Yeah, Fia was amazing as Helena. Like, she's playing someone that's a little a lot neurodivergent. I'm not capable of making a diagnosis, and we're not supposed to know exactly, but she's clearly neurodivergent in some way. And this shows up in her reactions and in her plea to her husband that she's afraid of the rats. And his reaction is it's almost comical. It's tragic but comical, because if you know what's going to happen, it's tragic and funny. If you don't know what's going to happen, it's probably just funny, but maybe Helena predicts things, so maybe something bad's going to happen. But the nursemaids just kind of look around on the floor like rats, like they're, And Aegon has that humorous line. He's like, the queen is an enduring mystery. Is she not? It's just that he delivers it so well. And it's like, how do you add so much levity to this very dark moment? Well, by great acting. That's how you do it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that moment and a couple other moments, I feel like Aegon's had a little growth here. Like, that was a very tactful thing. I think Aegon a year ago would have said something much meaner. He would have ridiculed her or scoffed at her or taken one of the maids in a room off with him, but instead he gave her respect.
It was a little bit of diplomacy. Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, he was confused. He knows everyone's a little weirded out, but he's like, hey, we respect you still. That was basically what he was saying,
Yeah, like when she said, what if he doesn't, you must not disturb him at his custom. He's like, where is he? She says, what if he doesn't want to be king? Aegon could have easily said something snarky. I expected him to. I was ready for the retort. Yeah. Oh, like me, I didn't want to be king, and they made me to do it, but I'm happy with it now, although he probably isn't going to be, next episode already. It's already going to turn quickly. But yeah, and the reason I think he's so magnanimous right now, and that was one of the suggestions for his name, that he was like magnanimous, is because he's high on validation. He just went in front of that crowd and everyone screamed for him and they were all so happy, and he's raising the sword in the air and they cheered even louder. He's like, all right, I'm going to do more of this. He's like, hey, how about this? They love me. Wow. This is unexpected. So he wants to return the love. They love him and he wants to return it. So he's like, yeah, I'm going to be a good to the commoners. Let's see how long that lasts now that a commoner has killed his son. But, we'll see. But yeah, I'm very impressed by the acting, and apparently the buzz from the set was that a lot of people were impressed by him too. Just the way he brought that kind of humor to places where it wasn't planned to be, and they're like, well, that worked. Let's keep that. That's really good.
Can I say an acting thing I really appreciated about him? Yeah, his humor. He's really funny, but there's also a certain element of uncertainty.
Sincerity?
Uncertainty that he has. You see this image I have on the screen right now, the way that a lot of the actors in the show and in the books they even reference it, do this, or the people who fidget with their hands in different ways. You see it from Alicent, you see it from Rhaenyra, and in Aegon here in the scene when he was so confident at first to just tell people what they wanted to hear, but as soon as he learned I don't just get to tell everyone, he's his acting, he becomes so much more uncertain in himself, and you see it in his whole dynamic and his whole demeanor here. And I think Tom Glencarney is a very good actor.
Yeah, very well chosen.
You're muted.
Yeah, very well chosen. And it's very similar to Daemon, not the way that they're acting, but the fact that they are showing uncertainty where they didn't before. They're not sure how things are going to go. Things aren't going the way they expected. They don't have the power they thought they did. And he's not as cocky and confident as he was. He's got nerves and anxiety and impatience, probably more than anything else. Daemon does. So you're seeing a little bit of a different angle to Matt Smith as well, and I appreciate that.
And as much as I agree so much with everything you're saying, and my next comment, I don't want it to take away from it, but I do also want to point out that I feel like I was saying it, he's grown and growing, because he does start off with the, all right, yeah, let's give you the sheep back. And Otto's like, look, there's going to be a problem with that. And he's like, he sees Otto's point. He wasn't just like, screw you, I'm the king, I can do it. He wasn't Joffrey there, right? He's like, okay, yeah, I guess we can't give you the sheep back. And so then the next guy, he kind of puts down too, he gets to be confident, oh, I'm going to burn that stupid blockade. Right? That's the next complaint. But the next one comes, and he's learned here. His demeanor changed a little. He didn't have quite the confidence he had before, but he's learned, because what he wants to do is reward the blacksmith, but he knows Otto's not going to let him.
Yeah.
So he makes it hard for Otto to stop by saying, we owe so much to the common people.
Yeah.
So now, you know what I mean?
He's understanding how he just was taught that when the king speaks, everybody hears it. So he's like, oh, I'm going to do that right away. He's like, once I say it,
he's realizing it. people are going to listen to him, but he also doesn't want to create problems for himself. Like, he's learning a lot. And I think that's part of what this scene was showing. Same thing when Larys comes up to him in a moment. Sorry if I'm jumping too ahead.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Document, but he doesn't, he easily could have, a Joffrey or many other characters could have, he sort of saw through what Larys was doing, right? He knew that there was something more to what Larys was proposing, but he didn't snap at him. He didn't take offense. He's like, tell me how, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, let me learn from you. I'm learning a lot. I'm figuring it out.
Learning on the job.
Taking advantage of like my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how to not be, so.
Yeah, and that was a perfect example because Larys is just so creepy and his dialogue is so well written and he cuts to the chase just right. He knows exactly the leverage point that you're anxious about, the thing that will get you to move. He knows exactly what to say, and it was perfect.
In a
diplomatic. It's diplomatic, yeah.
He gives himself an out, like, oh, I just meant blah blah blah, Yeah,
he's like, oh, not me. He's not saying name me hand. He's not saying any of that. He's just saying, you might want to consider that, like, he was your father's hand, not your hand. Like,
he's
you
not
don't
even
have
saying that he's not your hand. It's the implication is there.
The implication.
If Aegon or someone challenged him on that, like, oh, well, just because it's your dad's hand doesn't mean you be yours too. I'm all behind.
Yeah, you could keep him if you want, but
deniability.
Yeah, you can keep him if you want as your hand, but has anyone just pointed out to you that you actually have that choice? And he's like, he kind of, his eyes kind of go back, like he's like thinking about it, like he never considered it. And in a scene not too long after this, Alicent basically tells Otto, they look up to you. All my sons look up to you, which was true, but not realizing that it's just been undermined. They just got undermined right before that moment, which is really, again, shows how well the episode flows and connects, and it makes these things easier to catch.
Because it's extra ironic that conversation Otto and Alicent were having was about how he was undermining her.
Yes!
So there's another layer happening that neither of them are even aware of.
Yeah.
So well done.
It's really good. Yeah, just excellent. Yeah, and Otto as well, his way of approaching Aemond later was like super diplomatic, super like, he's like, you got to learn discipline, but then which is like, unlike your brother, who we both know you're much more disciplined than him. It's like, which Aemon's about to like say something, and then he's like, okay, you just assuaged my ego. And we know that's true. We know that Aemon thinks himself superior to his brother. That came up plenty of times last season. And like, he's like, if they come to choose me for the king. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I love how they broach these topics and manage to like drop negatives and praise at the same time and do it in the right order. Like, the good cop, bad cop, but there's just one person. They're there. He's good cop and bad cop at once. Like Larys and Otto both do it. And yeah, we may as well talk about it now because you brought it up, that Alicent conversation with Otto where they have their private moment. That was a great scene too. First of all, again, great dialogue, great writing for the words that they chose. I had a moment of respect for Otto. Those are rare, where she points out, look, if we're you and I are trying to keep my sons in line, how's that going to work if you undermine my authority? You give credibility to this guy and this guy, but when it comes to me, I mean, she doesn't say it, but it's basically misogyny. It's like, well, you do it for the men, but not for me, And that's not the word they choose, but that's basically what's happening. And he agrees. He's like, I hadn't thought of it that way. And it's like, look, we need to work together. We made this guy king. And this is when they start to make a mistake. This is when they realize, this is when they're maybe not arrogance, or maybe the ship has sailed and they don't realize it yet. They think these are still children. They're not children anymore. They're like, oh, Aegon will get bored with ruling and then we'll take over. Aemond is just angry. He's just mad that he lost his eye. It's the caprice of youth. It's like, no, Aemond is fully ready to go to war and has a battle plan and all this other stuff. And it's not about his eye. He's got grander ambitions than that or something else. He just wants to prove it. Who knows? But it's bigger than they think. And of course, the idea that they can steer Aegon away from ruling after all this is maybe not going to happen, but we'll see.
There's another irony to this too, is that Aemon might be thinking the same thing as Otto and Alicent, because remember when he and Kristen got Aemon.
Yeah.
when he ran away, right, when he was missing, and Viserys had died, so everyone's trying to find him, and they get him, and Aegon is trying to he's like, no, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Let me go. Like, look, let me go, and I'll take a boat to Essos. You'll never see me again. Like, and Aemon was kind of tempted. It's like, can I make this work? You know, like Chris sounds like, okay, let's go now. Like,
I
okay,
guess not. Yeah.
But Aemon might be thinking the same thing that Otto and Alicent are. It's just a matter of time before this irresponsible kid gets bored, and we can just give him money and girls, and I can actually be in charge.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I agree. That is basically what they're thinking. You're right to think that maybe Aemon is thinking along similar line. Maybe he hasn't quite thought that far ahead, but maybe he has. It's absolutely possible. So I like that King's Landing, getting back to the blacksmith moment and tying that into the scene where Vhagar arrives at King's Landing. Mostly I just want to point to the status of King's Landing and how they're on alert for dragon attacks, which is ironic given where the danger actually comes from, that they're not seemingly aware of. Now, it might have seemed funny at first. It's like, why do they just have the one scorpion? You know, like, but that's explained later when Hugh Hammer is sitting there saying, a scorpion takes weeks to build, and we don't have proper iron thanks to the blockade. So that's why they only have the one scorpion. It's actually explained, and that makes sense. Why wouldn't they have had a lot of scorpions before? Well, that's an easy answer. Why would the Targaryens put those up? That's the only thing that kills dragons. They don't want those dragon-killing things, you know, out there. They want none of them to exist. This is the only time they want them, the one time they've turned on each other. So you would never see those things built anywhere in the Seven Kingdoms, because the only reason to build those is to shoot dragons. At least in this setting. There are other reasons to use them, but in this setting, they're pretty much dragon killers, or would be seen as that, you know, by the Targaryens. So I thought that was cool. It's a small thing, but notice how even Larys makes this mistake. We're talking about when Larys approaches Alicent. So let's back up a little bit. We have him doing the same sort of open-ended question. He says, I tried to see you before the small council meeting, but your maid said you were indisposed. And of course, she was hooking up with Kristen Cole, and according to her, it would be the last time, but obviously it wasn't. And then he says, I fired everyone in your household, killed all the traitors, and replaced everyone with my own people, which might include the handmaid he just mentioned. And Alicent immediately is like, oh, great. We already talked last year about how she was getting herself trapped by this guy. Now she's just like even more trapped by him. And you see her, she's taking a bath, and she just doesn't want any of them around. She's like, no, get away. Everybody leave me. And
you're sparking so many thoughts in my brain, Aziz. I want to point out that I think that scene in a bath, not only did she not want those people around her, but she couldn't get herself clean. I think that's part of what's going on.
Oh yeah, 100%. Right? Yes, there's no amount of scrubbing is going to scrub away the shame, the hypocrisy. And I'm glad she's getting some. She deserves it, but that doesn't mean she's not feeling shame and hypocrisy.
Yeah. And she might not deserve it in this particular way, because that was another scene from last season when her and Kristen were walking together, talking about plans or frustration with Rhaenyra. And I can't remember what it was, but he called her some awful name, you know. And Alicent stopped in her tracks, and she was like, Sir Kristen, like, we're supposed to, the reason we're right is because of decency and honor. Yeah. And that we have to stay decent and honorable if we're going to stay right. And he's like, you're right, that was beneath me, I'm sorry. But now that's gone. Like, they don't have their pretense of righteousness anymore.
Power corrupting them, yeah. Good catch. That's a very good catch. I didn't think of that one.
And also, I wonder if she, on some level, at least suspects that Larys might know that she's having an affair with Kristen. He wasn't specifically telling her that, she's got to be worried about it. And Otto was suspicious too. Remember,
Otto gave them both looks.
Coming off the heel.
Yep, he gave them both a look.
And I think all of that is one, maybe to let us know as an audience that they're onto her, but also to let us know that probably wasn't a one-time thing that just happened in a moment of passion. It's a routine they've got going.
Yes. And it was full of the symbolism of her putting the white cloak back on him, which is like,
which also paralleled Kristen Cole when he slept with Rhaenyra.
Parallels more than that, Sean. It parallels when Alicent dressed Rhaenyra in that very room, like with a lot more lovingly before her, before she was named heir. It was that same room, and she got her dressed for that. So yeah, I think it parallels a few things.
Also, the room that Alicent and Cole are in at the end of the episode is the same room Cole and Rhaenyra hook up in the first time.
Yeah, Alicent is living in Rhaenyra's bedroom now.
Yeah.
Like, Alicent has moved bedrooms to Rhaenyra's old room. Helena is in Alicent's old room. Aegon is in Viserys' room.
Yeah.
And who knows who else has moved around.
And, I'm going to open a minor can of worms here, but in the past, I've made, maybe have had a tendency to defend the gorgeous Kristen Cole. And I have lost some respect for him. So some of my reasoning behind, and it wasn't so much that I wanted to defend him. It's just that it felt weird to me how much hate he got relative to how much hate Daemon got. It seemed like Daemon did more villainous stuff, but I didn't know where the story was going. And so, but I definitely, like, Kristen Cole took a notch down here in my respect. But so did Daemon. Daemon got worse also.
Daemon did get worse, yeah.
But on some level, hey, can we give credit to the player, Kristen Cole, who has slept with 2 queens? Who else has slept with 2 queens?
Viserys Targaryen.
Oh yeah, Viserys Targaryen. That's true,
and I don't think anyone says he's full of Riz.
Yeah,
it's not Viserys
Targaryen. Is right up there with the king. Kristan, and
he has king level Riz.
There's probably a few other people that slept with multiple queens, and they were all kings. So there's a bunch of kings and Kristan are part of one group. Yeah,
that's pretty good. So. Let's see. Moving on to let's talk about the rest of the small council scene. So yeah, we have a lot of threads come back here that we've already talked partially on. We have Aegon bringing Jaehaerys to the small council, and this is both setting us up to grieve for the child and great character work for Aegon. Again, he wasn't taught to rule, and he was underparented, so he's kind of overdoing it here. He's like going too far by Jaehaerys. This is too young to be at council, but he's got the right idea. We appreciate that he wants to educate his son. The heir to the throne should be well educated, but he's not doing it quite right because, well, he wasn't taught quite right, and you can kind of understand why he's overdoing it a little bit. And
I also want to point out that it's really easy to compare him to Joffrey, but it's also easy to contrast him to Joffrey because he's doing this sort of he's kind of taking abuse of his power. He's making light of this whole serious meeting. He's manipulating and embarrassing someone. But when he goes a step too far and someone calls him out, he steps back, and that's it, right? Like, Joffrey would have pushed farther. He would have made his mom leave the room. Like, if you're going to tell me what to do, you can leave. And he would have made sure that Tyland was... Tyland? That's the Lannister.
Yeah, Sir Tyland, yeah.
Yeah, Lannister, yeah.
So, yeah, that's right, Sir Tyland, yeah.
Where's Jason Lannister?
He's the Lord of Casterly Rock.
He's back in the West, okay.
Yeah, and they're twins, so might be why you have them confused, yeah. But they're not twins in real life. It's one actor playing both roles, unlike Eric Ark. And I don't know about these Jaehaerys. I think that's 2, but I don't know. Probably, yeah, it is 2, I'm pretty sure. So, entering...
It's definitely 2.
What's that?
Yeah, it's definitely 2 actors.
As Alicent and Kristen Cole enter the chambers, we pointed out that Otto gave them a look individually. Cheese is there with his dog and some dead rats, and no one even looks at him. This is very reminiscent of how Arya was taught to behave like a commoner, and Reek as well. Just keep your head down, don't make eye contact, they won't even look at you. The show Andor actually has one of the best lines that speaks to this concept. He says... Like someone's asking him, how did you steal this imperial technology? And he's like, they're so fat and satisfied they don't even suspect. Suspect what? They can't believe that someone like me would ever get inside their house, walk their floors, spit in their food, take their gear. They just can't believe it would happen. And that's basically the arrogance that the Greens have here, not just towards cheese, not just towards the servants that they ignore on a daily basis, but the methods in which they are vulnerable to those people. They don't see that as a danger when it clearly is. A human being with a knife can kill any other human being given the right circumstances. And that's basically what happened. So,
and I think that was another good moment of writing, editing, directing.
Yeah.
Because it makes it more believable later when he just walks across the throne room with Aegon there, because he is just around all the time anyway. His presence is accepted. So
yeah, rats are everywhere. Like it would make sense that he would be there. Like no one questions it. It's like, yeah, rats, yes, of course. And there's just so many other servants walking around delivering drinks or who knows what. Yeah, so it just makes sense in that light. Now, speaking of people looking at each other, there's several looks in this in this council scene. Ironrod has a snarky comment for Alicent. Alicent's like, "Did we get any word back from Rhaenyra?" And Ironrod's like, "Yeah, you mean the apology for her dead son?" And Alicent gives him a hard look. Remember, she had it out with him during the coup. He's like, "Well, we got to do this," and he's like, "If you open your mouth one more time, I'm cutting your tongue out and sending you to the wall." And he's like, "Okay." So he doesn't like her, and I don't think she likes him. But our Grand Maester Orwell diffuses it by saying, I do believe it's like this is an indication that war is inevitable. Like he says it much more diplomatically. And then, of course, we have Aegon almost embarrassing Sir Tyland. And again, Alicent deftly diffuses this situation by blaming Sir Tyland. She puts the blame on him, even though it's clearly not on him. But she does that because that's who Aegon is upset with, and she has to play along. This is exactly like Season 1, Episode 1 of House of the Dragon, where Daemon is just being a total jerk to Otto. And Otto stands up because he's like... He brings up his dead wife. He brings up Allery, who wasn't named at the time. He brings up Allery Florent, and Otto stands up because he's like, "You just insulted my dead wife." And Viserys is like, "Otto, you got to stop letting Daemon bait you like that. You got to stop letting him do that." And he's like, "I'm sorry, Your Grace." It's the same thing. He's diffusing it by there's one person that just will not behave. So the mature person in the room has to take the brunt of it and just be like, "Yep, just sit down and let it pass." And yeah. Yeah. So when they get back to the business of the council rather than the distraction of young Jaehaerys, Tyland says his brother's leading troops from the west. And Otto points out that his nephew, Lord Ormond, is leading troops from Old Town. Easy to miss that he said Lord Ormond, which means Hobert has died. No, Hobert. No, Hobert. We barely knew ye.
That's Hobart Hightower. For those new, we like to call him Aubert. Very French. But now we'll say Ormond. I don't...
Ormond. And remember, this was the guy, the dead Hobert is the guy who said, "Hail, hail, Aegon the Conqueror, babe," or whatever, that dude. That's the dude who said that. Yeah, he dead. He dead now. So the way a lot of this proceeds is Aegon wants to intimidate other houses into following them. And it's straightforward. Like, look, we have dragons. Why? Like, it would be so easy. We go there. They would definitely say yes, because otherwise we burn them. So why is this a bad idea? And Otto's like, well, you've already demonstrated your power. You've already shown what Vhagar can do. Here we have talk of troops already mustering. We don't have to make any more demonstrations. We don't need to rub their faces in it. We can just say, look, we demonstrated our power. Let them join us. Let's send out our letters. Otto's probably right under most circumstances. Cregan was annoyed over the memory of Aegon the Conqueror threatening and forcing obedience through draconic threats, and approved of Cregan being more diplomatic and speaking to common goals like unity, which, remember, that was actually very diplomatic of Jace, too. He says, Torrhen Stark would never have bent the knee. He was so strong and mighty unless he believed in Aegon's message. He didn't do it because he was afraid. Like, that's the unspoken part. And Cregan's like, yeah, that's right. That's true. So in this case, I side with Otto on this one. Look at Boros Baratheon. His loyalty was taken for granted by the Blacks, and he got real mad about that. So yeah, you got to be careful with these lords. They are proud people. And if you force them into something, they might go against their own best interests and be like, no, I'd rather be violent and proud than on the winning side, So it is a real tightrope walk, and Aegon and Aemond and these guys, some of them don't really see it that way. They just feel like, hey, we're powerful. Everyone needs to fall in line. And it doesn't work so well.
I remember again on the rewatch, when Luke went to Boros Baratheon, that he was going with a stick and not a carrot. The Aemon went with a big stick, but also, I'll marry one of your daughters.
Yeah,
but
stick and a carrot.
Luke couldn't offer that up, right? we see a lot of other people. I'm actually going to segue into another thing I want to point out. We see some other people planning to use a stick, and as far as we know, without a carrot.
Mm-hmm.
Daemon wants to go to Harrenhal, and Aegon wanted to go to Riverrun, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm going to show up my dragon, and we're going to do what I say. They're not bringing carrots with them. And so maybe for a minute with the dragon in their face, it might go along, but I don't know if you're really going to win their loyalty. But I want to point out, they are also, the Greens are now also deciding to go to Harrenhal, right? When they're looking at that war map, right?
Yeah.
So we have the Blacks and the Greens both planning to go to Harrenhal. Who's the Lord of Harrenhal now?
It's still Larys Strong. Yeah.
Yeah. His character is even more integral, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
He's not there, so I'm not sure how it's going to matter.
And they've been talking about his castle without him in the room. I know. That's a little, it's partly why you might want to know what they're saying.
Yeah, will Aegon need to go there? Can they just go to Larys and say, hey, your castle's behind us, right? Like, I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but it's something I'm starting to pay attention to.
Yeah, he would have to send an order, and maybe they would obey it or not. Yeah, this is going to be explained. You're right to question these things, but yeah, it's coming. And don't you love how Aemond, just the first thing he says, he comes into the council room and they're like, wait, what are you doing here? Alicent's like, you don't belong here. He doesn't want her here, or she doesn't want him there because they want to isolate Aegon and convince him of the things that they think are right without the influence of this aggressive younger brother who clearly has some violent intentions. But Aegon, like wanting Jaehaerys there, he wants his brother there. He trusts his brother and relies on him. And Aemon immediately walks to the map and says, we got to go for Harrenhal. And it's like, this isn't a coincidence. This isn't random. This is because, these are two military-minded men who made the same strategic decision, the same strategic read. Yeah, and they're right. I mean, it does run like that's the reason so many other things have happened around Harrenhal and in other parts of the story and other timelines.
And it's probably why Harrenhal was built where it is. That's why Harren built it there. That is the strategic spot.
Yes, you are correct, sir. So they also Rhaenys, yes, and Otto and Alicent on their side do not want it to become a war of dragons. They want it to be just keep it a war of men. And then, they're still trying to have some restraint. Like, yes, children have been killed. Yes, the throne has been stolen. There's different levels of this where someone like Aemon wants to go straight to dragons. Daemon wants to go straight to dragons. But some of the other folks here are just like, okay, there's levels to this. It's DEFCON 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It isn't just war or not war. But too many people, just not enough people see it that way, I guess. Super chat from Fernando Corona. Love how Team Black is still somehow more likable than the Greens after having a child's head sawed off. Cole and Alicent are just awful. Yeah. We all have our opinions, don't we? I think a lot of opinions will change over the course of the season, but maybe not. I mean, like Fernando has almost certainly read the book already, so these opinions aren't likely to shift a whole lot. But maybe they will for the show versions and not. I don't think Alicent is awful in the show. I do think she's pretty awful in the book. But
however awful she is, I could even entertain the argument that she's awful. She's not as awful as Daemon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No question there, I think. Power struggle. Let's talk about some of the various power struggles. They play out in a lot of ways and in many places, all over, mostly in the Red Keep for the Greens. Also for the Blacks, we'll get back to that. Aegon's friends are where I'll start. They're not really political actors, but they are absolutely influencing him. They are egging him on to use his power, which I suppose fits for a man named Aegon. And they are drunk. They're almost as drunk on strong wine as they are on power. Like, these are his buddies, and their buddy just got made king, and they're all like, oh, how can this benefit me? We can party, we can do this, we can do that. These aren't like decent men. I don't know that they're bad guys. They might be, though, considering who their friend is. The Aegon's rap sheet is bad enough that I imagine the people he chooses as friends are probably not the most moral guys, but...
Should we take a moment and say who they are?
Yeah, go ahead and say who they are.
We've got his little homies, little friends here. He's got Martin Rain. We'd wondered before who that is. It's a Rain. It's now an extinct house. The blonde. Yeah, the blonde kind of red. I'd say red hair, kind of, honestly. But Leon Estermont, one of George's favorite houses because of the turtle sigil, so that's kind of fun. And Red Ned Waters. Yeah, Eddard Waters. He's a bastard, right?
Oh, the African American guy is
Red Ned. Sorry, I meant to say Eddard Waters is his
Eddard
name.
Waters.
His
Oh,
name
okay,
is
cool.
Eddard Waters.
That's the one whose name I didn't know because they
Yeah,
gave
that's
away
Eddard
Martin
Waters.
and Leon ahead of time. I didn't know about. I was wondering what that guy's name was because he's the one who said, "You're the king. You can do whatever you want," which is exactly the kind of line I wanted to point to. That's showing the influence of his friends and is just maybe corrupting him or pushing power to go to his head sooner than it might have otherwise. And this also reminds me of season 1 episode Rhaenys speaking during the tournament when people just start killing each other. And she's like, these young men, these summer children, they just got sent here with their balls full of seed and they just looking for a fight and looking for glory or whatever. And these are the kind of people that are encouraging Aegon to do the things he's doing. These are who he's listening. This is the kind of person he's listening to. Younger men who have no experience, who have never fought in a war, who lack the wisdom to avoid such things, who thinks that war is a good thing, which, again, this brings up a Clash of Kings, Catelyn visiting the tournament of Renly, and where Brienne talks about we're the Knights of Summer, and Catelyn's like, yeah, you are. You sure are Knights of Summer, but I don't think we interpret that phrase the same way. You think it's a good thing. I do not. I think it's a sign of naivete and of hard lessons that need to be learned. And so this is a regime filled with uncertainty. You got all sorts of people jockeying for position, whether it's the king's ear because they're his friend and want to drink with him and just their advice is bad. They're just, bad company. They're just a bad influence on him, or whether there's people with political aims like Larys or Otto or even his mother.
I'm going to try to have maybe naive myself, but a positive spin here is that, like you said, they were completely drunk on alcohol there, or maybe power too, but maybe some of the things they say and do in that moment, they rein in when they're more sober and in public,
Okay, yeah, maybe, yeah. Like,
maybe
I mean,
not.
yeah, like when they walked through the council, it's like Aegon the Magnanimous. Like they were reasonably well spoken there. That was, It wasn't like a clown show. It was a little weird, the name just being pulled out of nowhere, but it was given some comedic delivery, but it wasn't like they weren't looking like idiots in that moment to the general public. Maybe to us they do, but not to the public. They looked normal. I think they look kingly, I guess, like a new king might look. I don't know.
Can I say, I don't know if any of y'all watched the show The Great. To me, I saw a lot of shades of Peter and his friends, his entourage, and all of their activities. I don't know if you were reminded of that at all, Aziz.
Absolutely, especially on the eve of Freddie Fox being in the show, who was also in The Great, and he was kind of that ilk.
He was in his entourage
higher rank,
a bit, and there was even like a black guy, Arcady, in that crew as well, who was always kind of jostling about as well. And I love The Great, highly recommend it. And if you like the scenes with Aegon here, I think you'll probably really like The Great.
And Elle Fanning, who is the star of the show, would make a perfectly cromulent Targaryen. So let's talk about these various power struggles that mostly play out between a few different characters at a time. We got Aegon and Otto and Larys. So remember that Otto is trying to tone Aegon down, confronts him during the petitioner session, as we already discussed. He gets him to back down on the sheep, but not the blacksmiths, right? Larys was watching the whole time. Let's not forget. He was watching from the gallery from high up. And this is immediately after the scene is when he suggests changing hands. Recall that this isn't just random and out of nowhere. This isn't just Larys currying favor with Aegon, though that's probably part of it. Otto started putting pressure on Larys at the end of last season, and Larys flipped it. He's like, yeah, but look how useful I can be to you. He's like, yes, I've been talking to your daughter. What do you want me to tell her? What do you want me to tell you about her? Like, I can give you all that information right now if you want, just don't. This is the kind of thing we would expect Varys to do, his counterpart in the future. There is a lot of difference between these characters, but this is one thing they have in common, which is taking someone that's mad at them and flipping that into, wait, I'm useful. Like, I'm more useful to you alive, and let me tell you exactly why. Here's some things that I wasn't useful to you about before, but I can do that now. And that's kind of what Larry's like. They don't give you everything at once. It's like, let me be useful to you in spurts. Otherwise, my usefulness may cease entirely, and then I'm screwed.
They don't say this, and hopefully the other person doesn't, well, for their sake, hopefully the other person doesn't realize it. But what they're doing is, rather than becoming a pawn, they're making you the pawn.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good way to put it.
Yeah, because Otto, if I remember right, Otto confronted Larys and said, "You've been spending a lot of time with my daughter," and he's like, "Yeah." Wouldn't you like for that time to be to your advantage?
Yeah, it was really well said. Yeah. It's like, don't you want the benefit of all that? And he's like,
yeah.
Oh, actually, yes, I do.
I was like, okay, yeah.
Like, good point, actually. Yeah. Maybe that's what I should have asked for in the first place, or something. Yeah. So we already talked about Otto and Alicent's conversation, which I praised. Thought that was really well done. But let's not forget that that's part of the power struggle. Them trying to figure out how to control her children, his grandchildren. Meanwhile, Cole and Aemond are scheming too. They want to convince Aegon privately to go to war. Or at least that's what they realize they'll have to do because they know that Otto and Alicent won't allow it. Aemond is really tough on Alicent in the scene. He calls her two-tongued. He's like, she blames the war on me when she plotted to steal the throne. It's a good point by his that he's making there. He's like, yeah, it's not that he's not takes blame for it, but he's saying I'm not the one who started it. It's a fair point. It's debatable. And go ahead.
I wanted to say something about Aemond here. It's something that we did speculate last season about when he kills Luke. Well, when he is present for Luke's death, I don't know how to phrase it because it seemed like it was kind of out of his control. He might have been tempting fate, right? Like chasing him down with Vhagar, like, what did he think was going to happen? But it was also something that we kind of took note of, that the dragon riders maybe don't always have complete control over their dragons, at least not when they're kids, right?
Right.
And so I thought it was a really good moment of acting and editing when you kind of see the look on Aemon's face after Luke has been killed. He seems kind of mortified. He's like, what have I done? Like, on multiple levels, maybe he feels guilty about killing his, would it be his cousin?
His nephew.
Nephew? It might be cousin and nephew with these weird Targaryen matchups. But anyway, he, might feel some guilt over that. They were childhood friends. But he also might realize the implications, right? Like how, oh my God, how this is going to be interpreted. What is this going to mean? And on. There was a lot there. And I remember us wondering, maybe me more so than you guys, because you know what's going to happen in the books, but is he going to go back like with remorse and regret and
he didn't. He clearly didn't. Yeah, he clearly did not.
Right. Or is he going to double down? Like, yeah, I killed him. I'll kill him again. Who's next?
Yes.
And that seems to be what's going on. But I still believe that there's some amount of denial in him. There's some amount of him that just has to decide to be the badass, even if he knows he was wrong or feels guilty about it. He just can't let that come through. He just has to be like, I'm the warrior. Yep, I'll kick your butt too. My mom doesn't know what she's doing. It's just like his coping mechanism for the murder that he committed.
Yeah, and he's very determined. He calls his mother a fool, and he calls his mother Alicent, by the way. He calls her by her first name. He put
a pin in that. Remember that later. I want to talk about that later when we get to the Helena and blood and cheese stuff. Yeah,
so he calls her two-tongued and a fool, but Cole defends her, of course, because they're lovers, and he just blames Rhaenyra for everything Alicent does wrong. He says, like, no, she's not at fault. It's Rhaenyra's fault. And he repeats a line he said in season 1, episode 1, I think. No, not episode 1, episode 6, I think. He calls Rhaenyra a spider again. That's just like a term he likes for her. So... skipping ahead to, we're skipping around the blood and cheese stuff for now. We'll cover all that at once. But Otto discovers that they're plotting later, and it's a blood and cheese fake out because we know they're in the building. We know they're coming, and they're coming for Aemond or trying to. And as Kristen and Otto are sitting there, or rather, Kristen and Aemond are sitting there, footsteps come, and he reaches for his sword, and then it's just Otto. So like, oh, okay, nothing. So just a little fake out there. He sends Cole away. He sees what they're doing, first of all. He sees the map. There's coins on the map. He could tell they're planning a campaign. He looks at the books. It's pretty straightforward. Just sends Kristen away because he knows he can tell Kristen what to do. He's got nothing special needs to happen there. But with Aemond, it's again the discipline thing. He's like, you're more disciplined than your brother. The whole like good cop, bad cop within himself. So that happens. But what I want to come back to here is we don't see how the conversation ends. It clearly does, because Blood and Cheese later enter that room, and they're not there anymore. I don't know where they went, and neither did Cheese, because he doesn't know where everybody's apartments specifically are. But it's important to note here that wherever they went, Kristen probably didn't go back where he was told. He was told to go back to his post. I don't think he went to his post, because I don't think his post was inside Alicent's bedroom.
I think he did go back to his post outside Alicent's bedroom. He's probably supposed to guard her door.
I doubt it.
And then went into the bedroom after he went back there.
I doubt it. I bet his job was to guard the queen and the children.
Here's my question here, Frizzies. Then, which guard is guarding Alicent, if not Kristen? Is there another Kingsguard that then is aware?
They would have sent that guard away so they could bang.
Okay.
Because it make that there's a hole one way or the other, and this is a much smaller hole. Either you explain it as they didn't have a guard on Helena at all, or it was supposed to be Kristen, and then Kristen went away and sent the other guard that was guarding Alicent away.
Which is just a really major mess up on Kristen's part.
Yes.
As the Lord Commander,
yes.
right? Because yes, you would say that he should simply, if he knows he's going to screw the queen, then give yourself the queen's guard duty. But if he's in denial about the fact that they're going to do it, he would try to do anything to keep them, from doing it, right? He's trying to stop himself from doing it. So he's not giving himself Alicent's guard duty. Does that make sense to you?
I don't know that he's doing that. We know Alicent was hesitating, but I don't know if he is.
Well, it seems to me like he is hesitating, and it seems to me like that explains why the guard situation is funky. It's because he chose to not assign himself.
I see. That would make sense. Okay.
If he had just owned it, if he just knew that, like, I'm going to sleep with Alicent, then he would just give himself her guard duty, and he would have assigned someone to Helena, but he was trying to stop it.
I like that idea. That is very plausible. It would definitely help explain that bit of arrangement there. And,
There's more potential explanation too. Point A, they're down 3 guards, right? 3 of the Kingsguard are on Dragonstone with Rhaenyra, right?
Well, that doesn't mean they can't use just other people. They have guards. It don't have to be Kingsguard.
Right, yeah. That's very true. There should have been some guard, I suppose.
In the book, it's just 2 regular guards. It's not Kingsguard because it's not the king.
Yeah.
And some of the other circumstances are slightly different. But yeah, so like to me, there's not much difference than 2 non-Kingsguard and 1 should have been Kristen Cole, who's such a badass, but he just wasn't at his post. Whatever his post was supposed to be. Yeah. He wasn't at any post, so we know that much.
But, one thought that I had is it after when they went and they were both missing, that Aemon maybe went to find Kristen so they could continue their discussion. He's like, yeah, Otto, I'm still making this plan. But Aemon might not have found him because he went there. Yeah, there's lots of.
There's also just.
I think there's plenty of potential explanations.
There's also just their general arrogance that we spoke to earlier, that they just aren't worried about this. They just this does not occur to them as a means of danger, and you can easily. There's a million reasons why that would lead to them not having as many guards as they should. Or why they just haven't handled it yet. Why it's like you said, like we pointed out last season. Otto mentioned that there were 2 Gold Cloak commanders that needed to be replaced, and they needed to get around to that. That might have been one of those 2, because that guy was clearly loyal to Daemon and hated the Hightowers. That guy clearly needed replacing and wasn't. So it just shows that they're a little sloppy. They've been sloppy for a while. And like Laurie says, I got rid of everyone in the household that was a threat. Not blood, not cheese. That's the kind of thing that would come up on a modern security screening. A guy with huge gambling debts would never get hired on a job that has access to sensitive information or sensitive people. Yeah. But of course, they don't have such things in this setting or era or whatever.
It could be that Helena has guards, but they have to sleep at some point, or that Loras disrupted the schedule by getting rid of those people. One of the pieces of this, I'm still not sure. It's something that could easily be dismissed also, but Kristen is not only the Kingsguard, the Lord Commander, but also he was Alicent's sworn protector, like that.
That's how he started, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that just isn't the case anymore, but that would be a potential reason why he would still be her guard.
There's less reason to protect her. Like, she's no longer the queen. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's not a target in that sense. She's part of the dynasty, but nothing flows through her anymore. Like, she doesn't. So that's another reason why it's of course the heir to the throne is more important. That's the one who you expect to have protection. And there's 3 of them, just rather than 1 of them. But also,
and Aegon himself was just in the throne room hanging out. I don't remember there being a Kingsguard there. Maybe there was. I didn't notice. And there's probably other guards there.
There were guards there. There definitely were. Yeah, they walked.
Well, once again, you could see how the guards might have a hard time. There's so many freaking people they're supposed to watch. Aegon's up at all hours. Kriston's with Alicent and changing the guard duties, and this Loras guy just fired everyone. Like, sorry, we didn't have a guard on.
That's our problem here. I think too many Kingsguard knights, too many guards are with Aegon right now. Frankly, I think one should have been with the children. Is clearly and again, I think that comes down to Criston as Lord Commander. I don't think anyone else is really in charge other than Criston on that level.
Yeah, also in the book, they said that the king was off the table. They didn't even try to go for him because they knew the Kingsguard would have him turn. It's like, well, that's not even an option. Let's not even try that. But here, they're like, but the others, that's a possibility. There's only 7 Kingsguard, and as you pointed out, Sean, there aren't even 7 at this point. So the reason I wanted to talk about these things together, we still have a lot of Blood and Cheese content to cover separately. We've mostly just talked around it, and we planned on talking about it separately, and I think we're going to do that on Wednesday, so, almost entirely separately. But I wanted to talk about how Blood and Cheese is clearly going to shake up this power struggle. All this power struggle stuff is happening is going to be just thrown into a loop or thrown into the fire or whatever, just completely shaken up by this failure. Aegon's got to blame people. It won't only be Jaehaerys' head that rolls. Hey. And people will be blamed. All these slack factors that we pointed out, all the laziness, all the lack of security, all the not following through on things, that's going to be a reason to change things. A shakeup is needed when people are making this many mistakes. You're not going to fire the king, so the king's got to fire the people that are beneath him, whether that means he's going to take Larys's advice and choose a new hand, or fire Larys, or stop listening to his mother, or promote Ned Waters, or something like that. There's a lot of options he has. He could listen to Martin Rainmore, or make the other guy, the Leon Estremont. He could make him his captain of the guards or something crazy. There's all sorts of weird things he could do once he decides he doesn't, if he decides he doesn't like what's going on or the decisions being made around him. But it's also probably going to shake up the Blacks because there's already a power struggle there. And as you said, Sean, earlier, Rhaenyra is not going to be happy with this decision. She's going to be probably very upset. I'm very curious to see how she's going to react, because I think it's going to be a different mode than mostly silent grieving. I think there's going to be a lot more anger and talking. And this might push some of Daemon and Rhaenyra to a head. Because, it's not really what Daemon wanted either, right? He didn't ask for, he didn't target Jaehaerys, but I assume he said it was an acceptable fallback option, right? Because the way it's played out is he says, well, what if we can't find him? And then it just cuts away. Yeah. But Blood uses the phrase a son for a son, which was not spoken in those other moments. So he clearly used the phrase a son for a son
I think
once
he
it cut
even
away.
He said a son for a son.
He said a son. Yes, you're right. He did.
No head, no gold. These are different things that they're recounting. So how fairly or accurately they're recounting it, or how much they have their own motivations or whatever, might be hard to say. But I feel like there's a definite implication that Daemon, A, didn't fully think this out, and B, when they bring up to him the problems, he says, well, just kill one of the boys. Maybe he didn't think that was realistically going to happen, but one way or the other, it was very reckless and irresponsible what Daemon set up here.
Yeah, it was sloppy. It was sloppy. It was rushed, and it's partly because he was just champing at the bit to do something, and he finally got a chance to do something, and he rushed into it. And he saw the opportunity. He's like, oh, wow, Mysaria. All the pieces just fell into place in his head. He's like, oh yeah, I can do this. I got a rat catcher. It's easy to find some violent guy. That part's easy. I can sneak him in. Boom, done. That's really all he thought through there. He's like, sneak a guy into the Red Keep, tunnels, kill someone. Yeah, he didn't really think it through much more than that. So yeah, this is what I meant when I said we're seeing another side of Daemon who's a little bit less controlled. He's a little less, he's more anxious. He's more uncertain. Whereas before, Daemon was just so sure of everything, just ultra confident, even when things weren't going his way. He would get mad, but he was still pretty sure he knew what he would do next. Now he's he's out of sorts in this. This is not what he's used to. Even he is thrown off by all this.
he has to be worried about consequences. He's never been in that situation before. He never cared about the consequences. His brother would bail him out, whatever it was. But now he's in a position where he's part of a team, right? Like there's more on the line, and he should be worried. He still isn't, though. He's still like in the past when he wasn't worried about consequences, he could still just be the badass that he is, and his brother would bail him out. But now he's in a situation where people are counting on him, and lives and war and his family are all at stake, but he still isn't thinking about the consequences.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about Blood and Cheese as a whole on Wednesday. For the rest of this episode, we're going to go through the theme of duty and conflict and all the different Easter eggs that I alluded to at the beginning, and that'll wrap up our episode. We can focus on Blood and Cheese at another time, and that was kind of the plan going in. I wasn't sure how much time we would have, but we're going to add to it because we're going to also tie in some stuff from A Song of Ice and Fire to Blood and Cheese, the long-term effect, in a way that's not spoilery. So that should be a lot of fun.
I wanted to point out one little snippet I meant to mention earlier when Otto and Aemon were talking.
Yeah.
And, Otto's building him up. It's like, oh, you're obviously the most powerful force in all of Westeros, da-da-da. But he says, there are a lot of pieces in play, some of which you can't see yet.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I thought that Otto had some secret plan, or maybe he still does. But now I'm thinking maybe that was foreshadowing for them not seeing Blood and Cheese or similar things coming.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't. That's not what Otto was referring to. But yeah, what
do you think Otto was referring to?
I don't know. I mean, just
unforeseen things in the future.
He just other plan. He's just it's just his way of saying I'm planning lots of things. We'll see which ones work out. Okay. Like he's trying to get allies, and he's trying to get power for their side, and he's not sure what will happen and what won't. But
I want to.
It just sounds more. It just sounds cooler to present it to the king that way. He's like, I'm doing so much, you don't even know.
Yeah. Also wanted to point out like a little thought process or I don't know emotion I went through as I was watching a show. Maybe somewhere around the halfway point in my mind, I was thinking, where's this episode going? What is going to happen here? Because usually episode 1 is a lot of sort of setup stuff, right? And you're not going to have some crazy moment in episode 1, but the whole first season was kind of the setup, and this is it. Now is the time for the crazy stuff. So maybe there is something. There was so much talk of Daemon, Rhaenyra wants Aemon, and like, would they really kill Aemon in this very first episode? That'd be crazy. Like, it'd be kind of disappointing for Aemon to get killed. He's such a cool character, but no one would see that coming. I mean, that would be a shock. Maybe that we're not in my mind. Like, that's what I started to think was going to happen. Eventually, like, oh, it's going to be a little kid. That's it. But also I realized, and I want to point out, this is one of the parallels that I was seeing it. Episode 1 of Game of Thrones had Jaime Lannister push Bran out the door after seeing him have sex with his sister. Like, that, not only do we have an innocent kid get killed, turned out Bran didn't die, but in that moment,
it looked like he would.
Yeah,
it looked like he would.
It seemed like Bran was dead. And you also had the Kingsguard having sex with the Queen. Like, that's straight out of season 1, episode 1, Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
Is exactly what happened in
oh, yeah.
2, episode 1 of House of the Dragon.
100%. Yes, definitely. I'm glad you caught that. So did I. I was like, this is like super. So that's why I said at the beginning, I was like, there's so many callbacks to Game of Thrones, not just Hot D episode 1, but actual Game of Thrones. And I wasn't just talking about Winterfell. Yeah, that was a really good one. Because it is Bran's cliffhanger versus Harry's. You have a lot of these similar elements. You even have a follow-up to that. When Joffrey tries to have Bran finished off by hiring just random dude, which is a lot like hiring Blood or Cheese, like someone who's not really that competent and just not really having a good plan here. And like, no one was supposed to be here. Remember, that's what that guy says. He's like, no one's supposed to be here. And Catelyn's in the room. And this is like Blood Cheese at the opposite. Like, where is everybody? No one's here.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but am I going to be on that episode on Wednesday?
Yes.
Talking about Blood and Cheese? Okay, because there was a thought that I had specifically about that. Remember I said earlier
let's save it for them. Okay. Let's save it for them. Let's talk about the rest of the parallels and connections and themes. So, like I said earlier, Jaime Lannister would approve of this episode for multiple reasons because of all the conflicting duty and multiple oaths, all that. Let me just run through them just to see how many there are. This isn't necessarily for discussion. It's just to see the sheer weight of how much this episode delivered on that theme. Okay, so we have the Starks with their duty to the Wall and the South. The first line of the episode is duty is sacrifice. It eclipses all things, even blood. All men of honor must pay its price, etc., etc. Aemon and Cole believe they have a duty to talk the king into accepting their plan because they think it's the right way to proceed. They think that Otto and Alicent are too soft. They don't realize they're already at war. Remember, Sean, you said this before about the first one to win a fight is the first one to realize he's in a fight. Aemon and Cole are the ones, especially Aemon most of all, and maybe Daemon, are the ones who most realize we are in a fight. Why are you pulling punches? Why are you putting on boxing gloves? No, it's time for knives and dragons, and yeah, this is full on. I don't know why you guys are waiting. And meanwhile, Otto and Alicent believe the opposite, that they have a duty to not let it get to that point. They believe that they can stop it from getting that far and can and should try. And when Otto confronts Aemon about their secret plotting, what does Aemon say? He's like, I'm just trying to do the right thing for my house and my family. It's basically saying, I'm just trying to do my duty. It's the same phrase said otherwise. Eric decries the uncertainty of his duty. His oath was to defend the whole royal family, what it is to do when they turn, what's he supposed to do when they turn on each other. Of course, this is a callback to the first episode in Rhaenyra's voiceover for the Old King when she says, because he knew the only thing that could that could end the House of the Dragon was itself, or bring down the House of the Dragon was itself. And then Alan of Hull rather, saying he says it's just his duty to save his lord, which that's the one we said must have some conflict, but it isn't explained yet. So all of those were duty with heavy doses of conflict. Go ahead, Sean.
It wasn't in this episode, but it was coming off the end of last season that Rhaenyra also believed she had a duty to stop this from coming to war.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Otto came with these demands, and Daemon wanted to chop his head off right there. She's like, no, you'll have my answer tomorrow. And in the council, she was like, I'm trying to stop this war. That my duty isn't to make sure I'm queen no matter what. My duty is to protect the people of the realm, and et cetera. So,
and that's been carried forward a little bit, but she's not really expressing what her.
Abandoning that now.
Yeah, we're not entirely
happening here, but
we're not entirely sure where her head is at the moment. Like what exactly she's processing, what she's feeling. A lot of grief, obviously, but there's got to be more than just grief. A more lighthearted pattern common in all kinds of books and shows and movies is the interruption device. George uses it a lot, specifically when discussing lore. That's his way of using it. It's interrupting lore. But it happens a lot on TV and other things too. And it happens several times here. You got Eric speaking to Daemon. He makes a good point. Daemon's not sure what to say. But then Syrax comes back. Oh, well, I got to go. See you later. And Aemon's arrival at the council interrupts the discussion that they were just having about who should be the new master of ships. And someone suggests the young Lord Dalton Greyjoy, and then that conversation is interrupted. It's the second time a conversation about the Iron Islands is interrupted during a council session at early, like it happened in Hot Tea. I think it might even been episode 1 where they were talking about like blah, 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 Iron Islands, and Viserys comes in and blah, blah, blah. They start talking about other things. So little like they're trying to remind us that the Iron Islands exist, even though they haven't done anything yet. Cregan and Jace's conversation. Yeah, don't remind me. Yeah. Cregan and Jace's conversation is interrupted by a raven as well. So yeah. The ravens are a big part of this episode. The phrase dark wings, dark words is never spoken, which is surprising given how many other phrases from the past that are repeated phrases come up in this episode, which is going to be next. But it's implied several times. Obviously, Jace Cregan again, that's dark wings, dark words, and the North is probably where they say that even more. But also Rhaenyra and Luke getting the news and Rhaenys explaining that to Daemon and bringing up her own memory of getting that from Lena. And then Otto complains that the North and the Vale have not responded to their ravens. And again, the raven to young Dalton Greyjoy is discussed. So these things really work together. The uncertainty of duty and the interruption device and the ravens. The ravens are the interruption device sometimes. Sometimes it's the dragons. Here's some other callbacks and references. The episode title, A Son for a Son, is spoken quite a few times, but probably the most meaningful of those times is the time it's said off screen, given that conversation we just had about how Blood clearly knew the phrase, even though we don't hear it said to him. It clearly happened. Winter is coming. Perhaps the most stated of all the house words, except fire and blood. That phrase was said at a very poignant moment. It was after that, right at the end of his speech, and then it cuts to being lighthearted, where he's like, "Winter is coming? What is this then that chills my bones?" And that's very similar to some conversations in A Dance with Dragons, meaning the 5th book of A Song of Ice and Fire, where they're like, "Oh, this is just a summer snow," which he also says this is just a summer. What is it? A brief summer snow, something like that. This is only a late summer snow, my prince. He says, "Yeah, that's it."
Alicent told Kristen Cole in one of those scenes that there was a chill in the air.
Yes, and in the petitioner scene, he says, I had to give up 10% of my herds because of winter, which he didn't have time to prepare for because they don't know when winter is going to come. Yeah. So yeah, 3 different references to winter is coming, and yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So we also have a line that we've heard before. Do you think we built a 700-foot wall to keep out snow and savages? That sentiment, not those exact words have been expressed, but both in A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones, that's been expressed. I told you at the beginning that the drawing of the Black Stone is something that has been done before. It's done in, I think, Astapor, when Astapor is starving, and the different pyramid families are eating each other, literally, and the one who draws the Black Stone gets eaten. So it's not quite the same thing, but it is still drawing the Black Stone was used in A Song of Ice and Fire already. Of course, we talked about the Aegon and Torrhen changes. We thought that was pretty cool. And Jaehaerys and Alysanne's dragons not passing the wall was an interesting tidbit. In Fire and Blood, it's only Alysanne's dragon that won't pass. So they kind of emphasized it by saying Jaehaerys's wouldn't either. That's Vermithor, by the way, Vermithor and Silverwing. I'm not sure how we're supposed to reconcile this with Dany's dragons crossing the wall during regular Game of Thrones, but it's all magic, so some magical rule changed. I don't know, like the Red Comet flipped a switch. I don't know. The others appearing allows them. I don't know. It's got to be a supernatural explanation because there's no rational, regular explanation, I don't think.
I figure just the dragons back then didn't have a reason to push up against it. It was enough to discourage them. And the dragons in Game of Thrones did have the reason to push them past that. Like, they might have balked a little bit, but they still had to.
Yeah, I mean, that works.
Jon and Dany or whatever was enough to strengthen their ability or resolve or whatever.
No, I don't know why that wouldn't work with Jaehaerys and Alysanne, but yeah, no, but it doesn't have to. Like I said, it doesn't have to. A magical explanation doesn't have to.
They were promised. That's why.
There you go. There you go. That actually is a pretty good reason.
I just think Jaehaerys and Alysanne weren't trying that hard to get them to move past it. I don't think they were like, we need to do this to save the realm or anything. They were just like, oh, I guess you don't want to go.
Yeah, it was just more of a curiosity, right? They were just kind of flying beyond the wall for the heck of it. Although Alicent does say in Fire and Blood, she tried 3 times and he wouldn't go. So anyway, it's interesting. We'll see if there's any more of that. Cregan also says the line when he's describing what winter will be like. He's like, yeah, and all memories of warmth will be forgotten. Which brings us to our one book quote of the episode, because that line is in Bran's coma dream. Quote.
Finally, he looked north. He saw the wall shining like blue crystal and his bastard brother, Jon, sleeping alone in a cold bed, his skin growing pale and hard as the memory of all warmth fled from him. And he looked past the wall, past endless forests cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore and the great blue-white rivers of ice, and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north and north he looked, to the curtain of light at the end of the world, and then, beyond that curtain, he looked deep into the heart of winter, and then he cried out, afraid, and the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. Aziz, you're muted.
So that's death. The same thing Cregan says is death is beyond there. He doesn't have a straight answer to give to Jace, and he might not exactly know what it is himself. But when Bran peers deep into that heart of winter, it's basically death that he sees. And that's when the three-eyed crow says, now you know why you have to live and why you have to fly and do all these other things, because that's coming.
You know, I wonder if or when Rhaenyra will tell her kids about the Song of Ice and Fire. Like,
yeah, I definitely wonder that too.
One just got killed. She needs to tell Jace quick, right? Like,
yeah. Or before she gets killed and no one knows it. Yeah, exactly, right? Like,
there's a bit of a shared collective misremembrance, I think, about that going on in the fandom. In that I've been there too. I'm not the only person who kind of felt like Rhaenyra would have or should have told Jace in that ending scene when she sends Jace and Luke off
before he goes, yeah.
like I've seen multiple people say they thought she told him there, but they went back and rewatched it and she doesn't. And it's just like a Berenstain Bears type beat, you know, where people are like, I kind of felt like, yeah, she should have told him there, but she doesn't. She just doesn't. If you think she did, we don't see it.
And that is part of why we didn't expect, you know, some of the other expanding on that story in the North, because he wouldn't know what to talk about. He wouldn't know about, like, if Rhaenyra had told him about the dream and then Cregan tells him that stuff, he's like, oh, that sounds like the stuff from the dream. But they just didn't want to do that. It's too bad. I don't think they didn't want to. I think they realized they didn't have time for it, or they may have other reasons for it. But I doubt it just flew over their heads as a possibility. It's pretty straightforward, which explains why so many people just kind of remembered it happening when it didn't, because it is that straightforward. So I really doubt the showrunners just didn't catch that. I'm sure they have their reasons. Perhaps we'll disagree with those reasons, but for now, we don't know what they are, so we'll have to leave it. A lot of familiar phrases were used. The phrase "words are wind" was used by Aemond. The phrase "little and less" by Mysaria. The phrase "much and more." I forget who said that one, actually. We'll have more to say about Arya's connections to all the stuff there with Blood and Cheese in our Wednesday episode. We also have the phrase "hoary old bitch." You'd be like, what? What's that about? Yes, Daemon called Vhagar a hoary old bitch. In the book, Jace calls Vhagar the hoary old bitch. So there you go. Pretty similar. Aegon II's petitioner scene with the sheep had some vibes to Dany's sheep bones scene, where, you know, she had to kind of back down after what she was told, and she wanted to be nicer about it, and then was told, look, if you just give back the sheep to every person, people are just going to have sheep go missing because they know you're going to repay them for sheep, even if it didn't actually happen. They're just going to make up and lost sheep. But then this person turns out to have child bones, and that's where it's very different than the Aegon scene. It doesn't go that dark, but still, we're still dealing with dragons here, and that kind of thing could happen. If they wanted to have a scene like that in House of Dragon, they could, where like a Sunfire killed a child, or Syrax killed a child, or like, you know, that could happen. So yeah, that's a nice parallel there. Both sides blame their allies for not killing more people when they had the chance to stop the war from escalating. Mostly Otto and Daemon, like I said. Otto's like, looks at Alice and was like, yeah, we lost the element of surprise to do certain things ahead of time. And Daemon blames everybody for not killing people when they didn't. He's like, you could have killed Aegon, you could have killed Aegon, you could have killed Aegon, you could have, all these different, yeah. So, and the most tiniest of weird observations I made in terms of parallels was the army size reduction parallel that parallels season 1 of Game of Thrones. In the book, Robb splits his army and sends his horse to fight at River Run and his foot to fight at the Battle of the Green Fork. In the show, they change it so it's just a diversionary army of 2,000 men. In the book, it's like 8,000 men. In Fire and Blood, the number of graybeards sent south by Cregan Stark is 8,000 men. In the show, it's 2,000 men. It's the exact same, reduced by 4 times. Cut that by 75%. We don't want to have 8,000 men. We got smaller numbers, please. Let's do 2,000. So,
you know, I wonder if that's like if they need to show it on screen, that's a number they can show more easily. But they never showed it on screen in Game of Thrones. They never showed that army at all. So, and it doesn't seem like they're going to show it here either. Maybe down the line, these guys will get into a battle. But I feel like we're done in the North, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think so too. I think we'll see those soldiers, those graybeards, but not in the North. We'll see them when they arrive, wherever it is they're going to arrive. Presumably the Riverlands first, because that's on the way, like has been pointed out. That's on when you're walking south from the North, you end up in the Riverlands. There's no other way to go unless you take ship. Okay, folks, that is basically it for our first episode. We got lots more coverage of the season. Obviously, we'll be coming back on Wednesday with a more complete discussion of Blood and Cheese, like I said. And we will be back on Saturday with our first preview episode with a guest. We've had a preview episode, but not with a guest. And it will be Maester Mary. So we're pretty excited for that. We'll talk about episode 2 on Saturday at 3. Wednesday at 7 Eastern is the Blood and Cheese and Rats and Cats and Arya discussion. And we'll be back Monday with another one of these with Sean. And happy Hot D Season 2, everybody. Thanks to Bran for our awesome new intro. We love it, and we're excited to see it evolve just like the actual show's intro is going to evolve. That's a really cool thing we have to do in parallel there. Thanks as well to Michael Klarfeld, and thanks as well for the maps behind me here and all the other great things he does. Check out claradox.de. That's KLARADOX.de. You can buy the map files from him, have them printed. It's a great way to decorate your house. But yeah, can't wait to talk more, folks. We're just getting started. Any final words, Sean or Ashaya?
Not that I can think of.
What?
Not if I've got more to say on Wednesday. Stay tuned.
I'll say I think we should have a segment next time where we talk about what we thought about if we liked it or didn't like things in general. I don't feel that I don't think I have a sense of whether Sean or you, Aziz, found it effective, good, anything. Or...
Just the episode as a whole?
Yeah.
We can finish with that. Yeah, let's finish with that.
I would like to know what people thought, our tone. Like, for example, I think that you really felt the lack of 2 episodes. They didn't choose to make it 8 episodes. That was a budgetary choice. But I think that there were multiple beats where I would have preferred to see them sit with it for a moment, or I would have liked to see how people reacted. And I think because of the time constraint, I understand why they had to skip it. But I felt that lack a bit, and that's my complaint. I still give it a great score and loved it and found it effective, but I would mourn that briefly with all of you. I think a lot of you feel that, but I would like to say it was not Ryan Condal's choice. Like, he wanted
HBO
10.
said, 8 episodes. Yeah. Their call. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we can't blame the showrunners for that. Absolutely. There's a lot of things you can put on them, but not that. And, I mean, not that you have to put things on them, but you shouldn't put that one because it's not their call. Yeah, so I take Ashaya's lead here. I did really like the episode, but now that you're pointing to that, I think you're right, and just think we need to be wary of going forward. We were already kind of conditioned to not expect certain things, like us, meaning here. Like, we had already kind of come to terms with the fact that there's not going to be the Pact of Ice and Fire, Sarah Snow, and all that stuff seems very unlikely. So we already knew some things were cut. I didn't fully address that as a matter of the season being 2 episodes shorter, and that might explain some other things that we come up on later and be like, oh, that was a little shorter than we wanted to. And it's almost certainly we can pin it on this if that does happen. But hopefully there's a lot of things that they're able to give the full attention to, and we find ourselves keep having this feeling very minimally.
I will say, generally, I thought the episode was awesome. I thought that the writing and the performances were great. I'm happy that they're not like shoving too many dragons in our face. I appreciate the drama and the intrigue more so than the action. And I don't think that, I wonder if on some level there's things you guys are hoping for or expecting because it happened in the book that I'm not. Because I didn't necessarily feel like something was missing here. When you do mention it, I can see how maybe they could have given more time to Rhaenyra's mourning of her son's
or just more
death,
in the north, for example,
search for the body, or more time in the north. But I also feel like it could have been a little of a distraction. I think that, maybe they were forced to do it in a way that was subpar, but the way they did do it, I thought was outstanding. Only giving Rhaenyra that one line might have been their solution to having to condense the time they have for her to mourn. And maybe, if they spend too much time in the north, then we might expect that to be more of a plot line. And maybe the fact that I'm not expected to be more of a plot line, maybe that's negative. Maybe I should be expecting that. I don't know. Anyway, overall, totally 2 thumbs up. I loved it. I was happy with it. I'm excited. Can't wait for the next episode.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks, y'all. Good call, Ashaya, on throwing that in there at the end. Maybe we'll do that at the beginning next time. That sounds like a better place for it. But wherever it gets in, as long as we do it, it's good. We'd like to hear from you all again on that, as well on that. Please tell us what you thought, whether you agree with Ashaya or just have some other completely different takes. We want to know.
I think it's good to do it at the end sometimes because it takes the whole length of us discussing it for me to really get clarity on where I land.
Good point. Good point. Very good point.
Before, but I don't know. I feel that there's pros and cons.
Yeah, it's like we're making our case for it, and then you're like, you know what? Yeah, that was better than I remember. You know, some of these things, now that we pieced it together, I liked it more or I liked it less. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, maybe we should keep it at the end.
It's been less than 24 hours since I saw the episode. You know what I mean? So like, and I had somewhere in there I slept, and I'm sure people in general, there's always like some immediate hot takes that people have, but I think in a couple of days, sometimes you realize new things or think of something a different way. Yeah, and you know, now that you bring it up, Shay, I seem to remember last time we might have done a little like a favorite part of the episode. We did
favorite actors. We did the favorite acting performances, and that was it. But I decided it was fun to do that. But I've decided now that we are more familiar with the characters, there's fewer new characters, and we're already doing more episodes per week. It's like we have to cut something out. We got so much to talk about.
But I was gonna say, and there's plenty to talk about. We're a whole hunk of this show we're setting aside. So yeah.
All right, folks, that's it for now. Valar, reread us, but also, especially in show season, Valar, rewatch us, everybody, and we'll see you next time.